Chapter 1146. Lin Yu could feel the glory qi in his body getting more and more agitated. In the end, he could no longer control it. A ray of light appeared in front of him. Under this ray of light, Bai Yu was almost completely lost. Now, her slim figure was like a water snake, climbing onto Lin Yu's neck and sucking greedily. Lin Yu frowned slightly. He could not throw Bai Yu out now. Without the protection of the King of God's order, Bai Yu might turn into ashes immediately. Lin Yu had a strong heart and would not be moved by women's charms and temptations. At the same time, he sighed in his heart, Bai Xiaoli is indeed a nine-tailed celestial fox. She indeed has a natural charm. Even in this trap, she can't escape. Lin Yu started to circulate his cultivation with all his might. Half an hour later, Lin Yu crashed into the barrier, and the surrounding air gradually cooled down. It was a long time later that Bai Yu woke up. Just now, after Bai Yu woke up, she recalled the scene that she had just posted. The scene was too charming and gentle, causing her face to blush instantly. It was like a ripe apple, tender and alluring. However, she quickly recovered and apologized. "Senior, it was an unintentional act. I hope you don't mind." "It's fine," Lin Yu replied indifferently. Then, he began to observe the surrounding space. This place seemed to be the deepest part of the volcano, which was the bottom. Because of the special barrier, the scorching aura of the black lava could no longer be felt here. Instead, it was replaced by a cold aura. This was a huge tunnel. Among them, there seemed to be collapsed pillars and rubble. It seemed like this was a ruin. Later on, it was destroyed for unknown reasons. But for some reason, it appeared in the deepest part of the volcano. "The fortune that your old ancestor gave you should be right in front," Lin Yu said indifferently. Then, he guided Bai Yu forward. After the two of them confirmed that this place was safe, they took a step forward and headed forward. In the tunnel, more and more ruins appeared, and there were also skeletons of unknown living beings. Bai Yu had a worried look on her face as she looked around vigilantly. It was as if an unimaginable battle had taken place here. Lin Yu even sensed the aura of the progenitor realm from one of the sword scars. He couldn't help but wonder if the fortune here had already been obtained by someone else. Before Bai Xiaoli left behind the good fortune, this place was already like this. Because Bai Xiaoli had gone into seclusion in such a hurry, she had not told him anything. She had only left him the exact coordinate. However, the deeper they went, the more complete the remnants became. An ancient aura emerged from the murals on both sides of the passageway. It was a desolate and primitive scene with unknown creatures carved on it. He was indomitable, and his figure was like a mountain. He had the power to carry mountains and split seas. With a raise of his hand, he shattered the chaos. Could this be the connate godfiends that appeared at the birth of the universe? Lin Yu's eyes were filled with suspicion. However, Bai Yu had no idea what Lin Yu was looking at. That was because the murals she saw were shrouded in a layer of chaos. She could not see through them. Perhaps it was because her cultivation was too low. Bai Yu was puzzled by Lin Yu's stop. "Senior, what are the engravings on them?" Lin Yu did not hide anything from Bai Yu's question. They should be recording the scenes of the birth of the universe. As he moved forward, the scenes also changed. Gradually, ancient ancestors appeared on the murals. They were offering sacrifices to heaven and earth as they wandered through the primitive mountains and rivers. There were also prophets among the ancestors who had already sensed the energy and matter between heaven and earth. In this primitive era, it seems that the obsidian qi is very different from today's. Lin Yu could clearly sense the changes in the scenes on the murals. It was as if his spiritual will was already in these murals. This was of great benefit to Lin Yu's cultivation. Therefore, he was very serious about comprehending it. This was because it involved the origin of the universe, and the progenitor realm was to sense the heavenly Tao and then fuse with it. This required a cultivator to have a deep understanding and comprehension of the origin of the universe. Seeing Lin Yu stop, Bai Yu did not urge or disturb him. Instead, she stood obediently at the side. She was waiting for Lin Yu to wake up. At this moment, she subconsciously looked at Lin Yu's chiseled face and recalled the charming scene just now. She couldn't help but blush again. She was beautiful to begin with. Her neck was long and slender, and her eyes were bright and beautiful. She carried a unique charm of the fox race. Now, she looked shy, as if she had walked out of a painting. As time passed, Lin Yu gained some insights from the murals of the ancient ancestors. Although the world has changed now, as long as I am firm, it is not impossible to attain the Tao. Lin Yu made up his mind. His Tao was different to begin with. Lin Yu did not want to be affected by the great Tao of heaven and earth in the future. Instead, he wanted to control his own destiny and jump out of it. Now that he had seen the ancient godfiends and witnessed the changes in the environment of the ancient ancestors, he was even more firm in his thoughts. Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes, which flashed with a deep light. "Let's continue forward," Lin Yu said. At this point, the passage seemed to have been cut off by someone. The scenes behind had become unknown. This seemed to involve an extremely deep secret. Some living beings did not want this ancient history to be exposed to the future generations. Lin Yu only saw blood flowing and despair in the last scene. Only half of a majestic and boundless figure was left. The murals after that were no longer there. After looking at it for a long time, Lin Yu no longer felt conflicted. Because the truth of the universe might not be something that he could grasp yet. When his strength increased, the truth of history would gradually surface and be known by him. After all, he still had the 10 monster kings by his side. These old monsters who had been born for countless years, he could find them to understand the secrets in the future. Not long after, they arrived at the end of the passage. There were 10 broken statues among them. An aura that made one's heart palpitate instantly spread out. Although they were no longer able to determine exactly what sort of living being was inside, the aura they emitted was enough to cause one to involuntarily kneel before it. They wanted to worship them. Bai Yu could not withstand the aura and was about to kneel down. One of the broken statues sensed Bai Yu's aura and emitted a faint light. In an instant, it triggered a change in Bai Yu's body. The statue was broken. Some heads and bodies had collapsed to the side. Even so, Lin Yu still felt that he was facing an endless universe. A sense of awe rose in his heart. As for the relatively well-preserved statues, he could only vaguely distinguish their characteristics. Chapter 1147. It was the statue that was emitting the light at this moment. There were countless tales behind it, but now there was only one left. Lin Yu had already guessed that the statues here were the 10 great monster kings. There were still bits of faith power flowing on the statue. This was also the reason why, after such a long time, the statue still existed. At this moment, Bai Yu seemed to have lost her consciousness. At this moment, her body was slowly floating in the void uncontrollably. Under the guidance of the light, she went to the front of the statue. When Bai Yu's body appeared in front of the statue, she realized how majestic the statue was. It was more than tens of thousands of feet tall. If it wasn't broken, she might not be able to see the top. At this moment, the last remaining tail of Bai Xiaoli's statue emitted a mysterious power, filled with Tao rhymes. Lin Yu knew that this was the good fortune that Bai Xiaoli was talking about. Seeing that Bai Yu had already begun to accept the creation, Lin Yu also sat down cross-legged. Now, in this space, only Bai Xiaoli's statue had undergone a change. And as Bai Yu's ancestor, there shouldn't be any danger. The only possibility was the test before accepting the creation. This was the inheritance of the 9-tailed fox race, and Lin Yu couldn't participate. He simply watched as the aura around Bai Yu gradually calmed down. He also began to cultivate. He recalled the scene in the murals and began to ponder. And just as Lin Yu was comprehending the Tao, in the passage there seemed to be some kind of power being drawn. It was very primitive. Roar, a dull roar seemed to have traveled through time and space and appeared in the passage. A primitive power swept out from the passageway. Lin Yu suddenly opened his eyes. His figure disappeared on the spot in an instant. When he reappeared, he was already in the passage. The murals seemed to have come to life. Among them, there were innate god-fiends and ancient ancestors, trying to break free. And the direction they were locked on was the end of the passage, where the statues of the 10 great monster kings were. "Behave yourselves," Lin Yu said indifferently. The aura of the godly king realm spread out and enveloped all the murals. Those innate god-fiends and ancient ancestors who wanted to break free from the murals were suppressed again under Lin Yu's aura. However, Lin Yu didn't show the slightest bit of joy, because he sensed that an even more powerful existence was about to come to the present world with the help of the murals. This made Lin Yu couldn't help but frown. Who exactly carved these murals? There seemed to be a river of time slowly appearing on them. They wanted to bring the living beings from ancient times to the present world. Just as Lin Yu was about to suppress all the creatures back into the mural again. It godly 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 gogadly godly godly gaga godly gogadly godly 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 gogadly godly godly godly, the terrifying power of time spread throughout the entire passage. There was a feeling of being torn apart. In the end, the river of time appeared and loomed over the entire passage. The chaos chi began to spread and encapsulated Lin Yu's figure. Under the dense chaos chi, Lin Yu's figure seemed to have suddenly arrived at the end of the universe. He stood on a long river of time that had already collapsed. He looked down at the rising waves with the posture of a superior. Lin Yu knew that in the long river of time, every wave represented a period of history. At this moment, Lin Yu's body suddenly descended towards the river of time uncontrollably. Lin Yu knew that this was the result of the confrontation between the godly king's decree and the murals. The origin of the God King's medallion was very mysterious, although the old God King did not mention its origin after leaving behind the God King's medallion. However, now that Lin Yu had broken through to God King, he found the God King badge to be more and more mysterious. The God King's medallion must have a great background. While Lin Yu was pondering, he had already appeared in an unknown era. He saw half a broken sun standing between the vast heavens and earth. He was currently at the edge of the heavens and earth of this era, which was like the peak of a mountain. "We've been waiting for you." Behind him were 5 people sitting with their legs crossed, as if they had been waiting for Lin Yu's arrival. Lin Yu calmly turned around. The 5 powerful figures were a little illusionary, but their cultivation was undoubtedly very strong. They gave off an unbeatable feeling. Lin Yu sensed a familiar aura from the living beings. They were one of the living beings that he had tried to stop from breaking free from the murals. This era is called Desolation. They did not mention their names. Instead, they mentioned the name of this era. This era is after the ancient gods have perished and before all living beings have awakened. Another living being emitting a fiery glow spoke again. "Successor, I wonder if the ancient gods of the later era have awakened?" The living being in the green light asked. As his aura spread out, it was filled with endless vitality. One could see the ancient trees around him constantly, as if they had experienced reincarnation. After withering, they would be reborn. Lin Yu calmly looked at the phantoms of the 5 creatures and faintly shook his head. "No. Is that so? Then it seems that the new reincarnation has not begun." Another living being nodded with a look of realization. Lin Yu had already sensed from the bodies of the powerful living beings that the river of time here did not seem to be the real river of time that was deeply involved in the entire universe. It seemed to have been created by someone. Although it was an era that truly appeared in ancient history, it was just a copy. It was also because of this that the 5 powerful living beings were so illusionary. One could not even see their faces clearly. "Seems like you've guessed it?" One of the living beings laughed heartily. "We have already passed away. It's just that a big shot cut off this era and left our figures here. Lin Yu listened to their narration and could not help but wonder what kind of person would have such means. That living being seemed to have seen through Lin Yu's thoughts. That person is beyond imagination. He seems to have escaped from the 5 elements and is no longer in the universe. However, speaking of which, he has an indescribable relationship with the artifact that you have. When the living being mentioned this matter, suddenly, primal chaos, heavenly lightning gathered in the sky. This seemed to have become some kind of taboo. That person could not be mentioned. The living being looked at the chaotic heavenly lightning in the sky and could not help but laugh. That's all I can tell you. Since you have stopped me from coming to this world, this is a huge karma that needs to be settled, one of the living beings said, and a bright battle intent burst out from his eyes. Fourth brother is still so battle-hungry, the living being in the center said slowly with a smile. Chapter 1148. Lin Yu knew that this battle was unavoidable. Right now, the King of God's order was clashing with the murals. Within a short period of time, he wouldn't be able to escape from the river of time created by this forbidden figure. Right now, the 5 living beings were all showing their battle intent. The river of time couldn't be touched. It represented great karma, even if it was created by someone. However, the power it possessed was no different from the real river of time. Lin Yu didn't show any fear. He looked at the 5 figures. He also wanted to verify what level his cultivation was at compared to the previous generations of geniuses in history. Let me go first. The living being that was surrounded by flames stood up at this moment. A powerful force swept out. It burned all the white clouds in the world. Lin Yu released his aura at the same time. Without a doubt, this living being that was emitting flames was extremely powerful. It was just that he had deliberately suppressed it to the level of a master god. Even so, his aura was enough to look down on the world. It gave off a feeling that he was invincible since ancient times. Lin Yu took a step forward. Their gazes met. Even the space showed signs of instability. Chaotic divine lightning kept bursting out as the 2 of them exchanged glances. Right now, the world was trembling as if it couldn't withstand the power of the 2. At this moment, the remaining 4 living beings emitted their auras and completely stabilized the space around them. They didn't attack together. Although it was said that they were asking for enormous karma, it seemed that they were more interested in verifying the strength of Lin Yu, the person who had come later. Lin Yu also understood their intentions. Then, he would do as they wished. A battle that transcended the river of time. Use your full strength. Otherwise, you won't be able to return to reality alive. The being in the fiery light slowly spoke. There was a destructive aura in the flames. He wasn't joking. As one of the 5 most powerful people in this era, although he had suppressed his realm, he definitely had the right to say this. Thank you for the reminder. Lin Yu nodded. He unleashed all his power. The aura of a peak true god was revealed without a doubt. This terrifying aura swept out. It even gave off the feeling that it was even stronger than that of ordinary lords. The 2 of them didn't say anything else. At the same time, the 2 fists collided. Boom! Under the impact of their physical bodies, pitch-black cracks appeared in the space. The 2 of them retreated 2 steps at the same time. Great craftsmanship doesn't work. None of them used their own abilities or technique. Instead, he used his body to fight. Not long after, the 2 of them had already exchanged countless blows. At that moment, the 2 of them simultaneously retreated 300 meters and wiped the blood from the corners of their mouths at the same time. From the living being's eyes, one could tell that he was currently in a state of excitement. I have dominated this era and polished every cultivation level to perfection. I never thought that you would be this strong too. Next, the fiery creature stepped forward, leaving behind a trail of destructive flames. I acknowledge you as an opponent. He charged out once again. He clenched his fist and attacked Lin Yu. Lin Yu cultivated both his battle physique and divine will. In the 12 universes, he was one of the few people who had embarked on this path to the Divine King realm since ancient times. At that moment, he wasn't afraid even in the face of a hero from ancient history. He didn't back off at all. He used his physical body to fight. Boom! Heaven and Earth's pole. Although it was protected by the auras of the 4 of them, a large area of the mountain peak was collapsing. Huge rocks like towering mountains fell from the edge of Heaven and Earth's pole to the ground below, creating a huge commotion. It was like a huge meteorite falling from the sky to the ground. It caused an incomparable earthquake. The 2 of them fought for an unknown period of time. However, both of them were injured. Lin Yu's shoulder was almost shattered. Meanwhile, the fiery creature's abdomen was bleeding. Lin Yu's fist had almost pierced through it. Lin Yu's right arm hung limply to the side. He had lost all feeling in it. However, the 2 of them had no intention of stopping. Even though they were panting heavily and were at the end of their tether, their attacks were still boundlessly terrifying and contained great power. One punch was enough to shatter a star. Both of them were exhausted. However, they didn't use any technique. Seizing the opportunity, the fiery creature clenched his fist and attacked Lin Yu's head. Everything happened too suddenly. Just when the 4 of them thought Lin Yu was about to lose, the corners of Lin Yu's mouth curled into a smile. The fiery creature sensed that something was wrong and wanted to withdraw his fist and attack with his palm. However, Lin Yu abruptly turned and unleashed a terrifying speed. Right now, the 2 of them were already completely exhausted. Their speed left the other 4 living beings in disbelief. This latecomer has been holding back all this time. At that moment, the leading creature saw through the battle and spoke slowly. At that moment, he waved his right hand and repelled the fiery creature's fist. Then, his right leg came down from the sky like a blade. He wanted to force the fiery creature to retreat. Both of them had their own pride. Since the beginning of the battle, they had always fought head-on. If the fiery creature retreated now, it would mean that it was showing signs of cowardice in this battle. It would also mean that it had lost its invincibility when it came to the level of its physical body. "Impossible!" the fiery creature shouted, facing Lin Yu's descending right leg that was like a heavenly blade. He actually shouted loudly as he charged forward. "Fourth brother is stubborn like this." At that moment, the 4 of them were ready to save the fiery creature. Even though he knew that he was going to lose, the fiery creature didn't give up and wanted to make one last attempt. However, he would undoubtedly have to pay a terrible price for doing so. Although it was a battle of physical strength. However, this single strike was enough to shatter stars one after another. If the fiery creature was hit, its physical body would most likely explode as a result. At the critical moment, Lin Yu withdrew 70% of his strength. Even so, his strength was still terrifying. The fiery creature was directly pressed to the ground and spat out blood. He no longer had the strength to fight. The scene was silent for a while. Then, the fiery creature stood up and cupped his hands. "I lost. Thank you for holding back." Lin Yu returned the gesture and said humbly, "If it was just a battle of physical strength, I might not be a match for you if you used your divine powers." However, Lin Yu had consumed a lot of energy in this battle. At that moment, his physical body was almost cracked. It was clear how powerful the fiery creature was. "Rest for a while and recover from your injuries. It's my turn next." At that moment, the creature walked out of the green light. He was calm and natural, as if nothing in the world could move him. Chapter 1149. "Thank you," Lin Yu said calmly, his body covered in blood. Then, he sat down on the ground without hesitation. Pure Yao Qi flowed around his body, and a powerful blood Qi circled around him like a true dragon. It was almost tangible. The latecomer's body and divine will are very strong. It's not surprising that fourth brother lost to him. The man in the lead analyzed. However, second brother's Tao technique is extraordinary. I wonder if the latecomer can survive this. More than 2 hours later, Lin Yu slowly stood up. The blood qi in his body was once again abundant, and his eyes were shining brightly. Have you rested enough? The man asked. Please. Lin Yu stood up and said slowly. The two of them then performed their divine powers. With a wave of the green being's hand, ancient trees that reached the heavens began to grow in the surroundings. This was the concrete evolution of his Tao, and it was extremely terrifying. As for the green light being, it was standing on top of an ancient tree. The ancient tree under his feet was like the Jianmu tree that connected heaven and the human world. He couldn't see where it ended. This was the Tao of nature. The green light being had cultivated this Tao to the level of perfection. With a single thought from him, all the ancient trees in the area seemed to have come to life. The branches of the ancient trees began to twist and turn into humanoid creatures, surrounding Lin Yu. Lin Yu's eyes shone brightly. Then, Azura's figure appeared and filled the sky. Lin Yu's body was held in the palm of Azura's hand. He was as tall as the sky and came to the opposite side of the man. The two of them were speechless. At this moment, Lin Yu's 8 great void tribes were fully activated. He had comprehended all of the 8 great void tribes, and it had the power to turn something rotten into something magical. The entire sky was now covered by the figures of the 8 great void tribes. The dragon tribe, Azura, Garuda, the 8 units circled around Lin Yu. At this moment, the true dragon's silhouette directly charged towards the ancient wood creatures below. Terrifying waves of air swept across the entire world. Even though there were 3 living beings protecting this place, they were still unable to hold on. You are very strong. In the end, the being in the green light said slowly. The fact that the green glowing man had said this meant that he had already acknowledged Lin Yu. When we were in the true God realm, we were far from being this powerful, a living being said at this moment. At the same time, the being within the yellow light had a heavy aura, and he laughed heartily. This is not good. Perhaps in the future, he will become the strongest sword and bring an end to the war that has lasted for countless years. Huang Guangling said half-jokingly. However, his words caused the other two to shake their heads repeatedly. That war that lasted for countless years involved too many things. It was not something that could be accomplished by a single person. The yellow glowing man naturally knew how terrifying the war they were talking about was. Every universe was involved in it without exception. It was unavoidable. In Lin Yu's era, there had been a war before. This was also the reason why the 12 universes were weak. At this moment, Lin Yu and the green glowing man were sitting cross-legged in the sky. One was sitting on the builder tree that reached the sky, while the other was sitting on the palm of Azura's silhouette. Their Taos were clashing with each other. Lin Yu's Tao was domineering, suppressing all the Taos in the world under his feet. Only the green glowing man's Tao could contend with it. The dragon tribe's silhouette below was constantly fighting with the creatures born from the ancient wood creatures. The dragon's roar shook the sky. As the sound waves swept across, a large number of ancient trees exploded, turning into essence and dissipating. Although the battle between the two was not intense, the silence gave birth to a boundless threat. They were discussing Tao in the midst of a battle, and it was accompanied by a confrontation. Although the two of them did not speak, their illusory Taos were connected. One green and one white, each occupying a corner of the sky. Until a long time later, Lin Yu slowly stood up. There is no strong or weak Tao. It depends on oneself. Then, the moment he stood up, the entire sky was shattering. The green glowing man suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. This shocked everyone, who did not know what had happened. Then, the builder tree under the green glowing man slowly dissipated, returning to nothingness. In the end, the green glowing being came to the ground, and now all the phenomena that had evolved had dissipated. The green glowing being stood silently in the field, and finally spoke slowly. I've lost. There was indifference in his tone, and he was not sad about his defeat at all. He did not like fighting to begin with, and this time, he did not use any killing moves when he saw the latecomer. Lin Yu also understood this during the process of the battle. Lin Yu cupped his hands. Just as the other person was about to make a move. All of a sudden, the river of time shattered. Lin Yu's figure gradually became distorted. Now, the battle between the Divine King's token and the murals had come to an end. Although they did not know the outcome, now, the Divine King's token had already found Lin Yu's figure in this river of time. The vast power of time could be seen spreading. As for the so-called karma here, it was extremely mysterious and profound. However, Lin Yu could sense that most of the karma had already been eliminated by the Divine King's token. Everyone, if fate wills it, we'll meet again in the future. Lin Yu said indifferently. Remember, our battle is not over yet. I hope that we can still meet again in a certain era, and we can use all of our strength. At this moment, the fiery being stood up. No problem. Lin Yu nodded. Then, under the power of the Divine King's token, Lin Yu's figure disappeared from this era. When he opened his eyes again, Lin Yu had already returned to the passage. However, the passage had already returned to its original state. Only a drop of the power of time was flowing on it. Lin Yu stared at one of the murals and fell into deep thought. Living beings like this had an endless lifespan. Perhaps they might really meet again at some point in the future. Lin Yu went through the experience of the battle just now. He could sense that his body had improved after coming into contact with the relatively primitive rules of the era. He was only a step away from achieving the Master God realm. It felt like he could have a breakthrough at any time. However, Lin Yu was not in a rush. Instead, he wanted to go through a period of consolidation to polish his true God realm to perfection. He then glanced at the entrance of the cave. The current Baiyu was also undergoing an intense transformation. 5 fox tails reached out from her back with a misty, immortal glow. They encapsulated Baiyu's figure. However, Lin Yu had no idea how much time had passed in the outside world. 4 cultivators at their level, 100 years was just the blink of an eye. Chapter 1150. Another 2 months passed. At this time, the radiance around Baiyu's body was slightly restrained. At a certain point in time, the dense radiance suddenly became blazing. It shrouded the entire space. It even rushed out of the passage and the crater, and appeared in the outside world. She should be successful. The second palace master's eyes were filled with surprise. They had high expectations for Baiyu. When they were on Sky Island, they had done their best to cultivate her. Now that she had obtained the fortune left by the ancestor, her future would be limitless. She could become the successor of the sacred land and inherit the position of the sacred lord. A few months ago, Patriarch Lu had sensed the changes within. It seemed to have some kind of power of time. Although his cultivation level had dropped, his understanding of the Tao law was very deep. He was worried because he sensed that there were a few more auras below besides Lin Yu's. They were very strong. He knew that even if he was at his peak, he might not be a match for one of the auras. Below the passage, as the green light faded, Baiyu's cultivation level had broken through to the sacred realm. Moreover, there seemed to be a mysterious change in her sea of consciousness. A cold expression appeared in Baiyu's eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. Thank you for protecting me, senior. Baiyu came to Lin Yu. Cough cough. Lin Yu coughed softly. Baiyu fell into a state of doubt and doubt. Soon after, she cried out in alarm. That was because the process of her accepting the good fortune was too intense. It caused her undergarments to be completely torn apart. However, as she was immersed in joy, she did not notice it. Her flawless figure was very slim and could be said to be perfect. Her waist was slim and slender, and her legs were pure white, slender and natural. Baiyu immediately put on her clothes. However, after a long time, the blush on her face disappeared. "Senior, you don't think that I'm a wanton person, right?" Just as Bai Yu's heart was filled with worry, Lin Yu's words dispelled her worries. "Since you have accepted the inheritance, let's go out. The grand event should begin soon," Lin Yu said slowly. Bai Yu nodded silently. Then, she came to Lin Yu's side and rushed out of the volcano with the help of the King of God's order. Now that Bai Yu had obtained a creation and her cultivation realm had increased, she could barely resist the blazing aura of the volcano. Therefore, the scene that happened not long ago did not occur. The two auras reappeared in the outside world. "He's out." Second Palace Master looked at Lin Yu and Bai Yu with unconcealable joy on his face. "I've already received the ancestor's legacy." Bai Yu was also overjoyed. He revealed a bracelet on his wrist. It was spotlessly white and flawless. Even the passage of time did not leave the slightest trace on it. The aura it gave off caused the Second Palace Master and Ancestor Lu to be shocked for a while. It definitely surpassed the level of a godly king artifact. However, there seemed to be a seal within it that prevented Bai Yu from using its full power for a short period of time. Otherwise, with her current Saint Realm cultivation, she would not be able to control such a magic tool. Second Palace Master asked Bai Yu to keep the artifact carefully. Unless it was absolutely necessary, she must not reveal it. Now, with the help of this artifact, even if most of Bai Yu's power was sealed, her supreme power was still hard to resist. "Since we've obtained the creation, let's return to Heavenly Island," Second Palace Master said slowly. The three of them nodded. Ancestor Lu rode on the immortal sword and quickly left. After stepping through the teleportation array, they returned to Heavenly Island after more than a year. Now, the entire Heavenly Island was filled with a tense atmosphere, because soon the grand event would begin. They came to the main hall of Heavenly Island. The Lord of the Holy Land and Second Palace Master had been waiting for a long time. Seeing Ancestor Lu's arrival, the Lord of the Holy Land did not give him a good look. He just snorted and turned his head to the side. Third Palace Master was familiar with him. "Lord Sword Immortal, you're here?" Ancestor Lu nodded. He did not care about the Lord of the Holy Land's cold treatment. Then, on the luxurious seat in the main hall, Bai Xiaoli's figure slowly appeared. "You're here." Bai Xiaoli looked at Ancestor Lu and nodded with satisfaction. "Greetings, great monster venerable." Ancestor Lu faced Bai Xiaoli. His temperament was still otherworldly, and he did not show any respect or fear. "There are still 3 years to the grand event. Now, please stay on Heavenly Island and wait for the grand event to begin," Bai Xiaoli said slowly. Everyone nodded. The Lord of the Holy Land stood up, his face solemn. "The 10 Holy Lands that targeted 10 Square World will certainly send out more experts. I don't know if we can resist them." The Lord of the Holy Land looked at Ancestor Lu. Because his cultivation realm had fallen, there was no Ancestor realm in 10 Square World now. The other Holy Lands knew the importance of this grand event, so there might be more than one Ancestor realm expert. This was the point that worried the Lord of the Holy Land. 1,000,000 years ago, their master was the one who had the highest chance of reaching the Ancestor realm in the 10-direction world. However, due to the joint attack of several forces from the 10-direction world, he died in the Heaven Burial Ground. To the 10 Square World, this was undoubtedly a very painful blow to the present era's grand event. "Don't worry," Ancestor Lu said. He looked very calm, indicating that there was no need to be afraid of the Lord of the Holy Land. Brother Xing Master looked at Ancestor Lu and asked, "Your cultivation realm did not fall?" Even the Third Palace Master and the others looked at Ancestor Lu in surprise. One must know that they all had a deep understanding of the terror of a spirit formation. Under this spirit formation, it was impossible for an Ancestor realm expert to survive. If it were not for the Second Palace Master's pleading, Ancestor Lu, who was unwilling to leave, would have died on Heavenly Island. Ancestor Lu shook his head. You should know my cultivation realm very well. However, if I really face an Ancestor realm expert, I may not be able to defeat him. Bai Xiaoli stood at the top with a lazy look. His eyes were shining brightly. Obviously, he was very optimistic about Ancestor Lu's cultivation realm. Although he only showed the cultivation of an overgod, there was no doubt that Ancestor Lu's comprehension of the Tao had deepened over the past million years. Facing an Ancestor realm expert, even if he could not defeat them, he was definitely qualified to fight. Let's leave it at that. We are now the strongest faction in 10 Square World. Bai Xiaoli said tiredly. Although Bai Xiaoli's consciousness had grown stronger after the cultivation in the secret place, reaching the overgod realm, the 10 great monster kings could sense it. He could not make a move. Doing so would be breaking the rules. At the same time, Bai Xiaoli's pride as one of the 10 great monster kings did not allow him to do so. Chapter 1151. Time passed by quickly. 3 years passed by very quickly. Spring went by and autumn came. Under Bai Xiaoli's guidance, Lin Yu was now infinitely close to becoming an overgod. It seemed like he could break through at any time. However, Lin Yu deliberately suppressed it, as if he was not in a hurry to become an overgod. His goal was definitely not to become an overgod, but to reach a higher level. Instead, he wanted to broaden his path forward. That would require him to polish every single realm to a flawless state. Only then would he be able to benefit greatly from it. Then, a huge vortex appeared in the sky. It exuded a wild and primitive aura. An aura of despair surged out from it and into the 10-direction world. The Sacred Landlord and the others knew that this was the sign of the opening of the 10 great sacred lands' mysterious border zone, the Burial of Heavens. The Burial of Heavens was a place where an unimaginable war had taken place eons ago. Lin Yu had asked Bai Xiaoli about it, but she did not say anything about it. Obviously, knowing about this historical event was not beneficial to Lin Yu. Lin Yu did not dwell on it. Following that, the aura of destruction and despair grew stronger and stronger. The Sacred Landlord and the others felt that the time had come. With their help, they led the 20 strongest people in the Holy Land toward the crack in the sky. An ancient token appeared in the Sacred Landlord's hand. It looked like wood, but it was not wood. Although there were cracks on it, it still exuded a powerful aura. The ancient aura it exuded seemed to be even more ancient than the 10-direction world. This was the token to enter the Burial of Heavens. After the passage of time, now only the only force in the 10 great sacred lands still had it. Among the 20 people, apart from the Sacred Landlord, Lin Yu, and the other 4, the rest were all saints. The one with the highest cultivation was only at the late-stage saint realm. To the forces of the 10 great sacred lands, the 10-direction world had indeed been weak for a long time. Although it was not unrelated to the suppression of the human race by the Sacred Landlord, the main reason was that the old Sacred Landlord had died in the Burial of Heavens in the grand event a million years ago. Because of this grudge, the people of the 10 Square World were filled with hatred. They wanted to end it in this grand event. Endless destructive aura surged in the tunnel. Without the existence of the ancient writ, no creatures could safely enter. The Sacred Landlord was at the front, while Ancestor Lu rode his sword and traveled. Although he looked very old, his otherworldly aura still made people cast sidelong glances one after another. He brought the second palace lord like a pair of immortals. This made the Sacred Landlord was dissatisfied, but he did not show it immediately. Before entering the tunnel, Bai Yu's face was red. She wanted to go with Lin Yu, Sacred Landlord and the other Sacred Landlords. The reason for that was because Bai Yu had already been decided to become the successor of the Holy Land. As such, her safety was extremely important. With Lin Yu by her side to protect her, she must be safe. However, the palace lords had lived for a long time. Even their eyebrows were empty. How could they not see that Bai Yu had feelings for Lin Yu? The third palace lord couldn't help but sigh. Patriarch Lu, on the other hand, looked at Lin Yu with admiration. Bai Yu's talent was unparalleled. Her future achievements would definitely surpass the three palace lord. The three palace lords did not doubt that Bai Yu could lead the 10-direction world to become stronger in the years to come. She might even be able to restore the prosperity of millions of years ago. After seeing Bai Yu's feelings for Lin Yu, this caused the expression of the Holy Land Lord to change. Lin Yu and their ancestor, Bai Xiaoli, had a close relationship. If Bai Xiaoli allowed Lin Yu to take Bai Yu away, the 10-direction world would completely decline. Although the 10 great sacred lands had become desolate and barren due to the ancient war, after many years of development, they were not weaker than a universe. The living beings here had already developed feelings for this place. Although the sacred land's existence was originally for the Monster King to escape, there were other universes that signed a contract with the Monster King to develop here. However, they had underestimated the Monster King's means. The Sacred Land's forces were almost completely controlled by the Monster King. The Sacred Land's forces were chess pieces that existed for the Monster King to escape. However, in general, the Sacred Land's sacred lords were created by the Monster King according to his bloodline and aura. They were the descendants of the 10 great Monster Kings. In order to save their patriarch, they were willing to go through water and tread on fire. Everyone knew the importance of this event. For the 10-direction world, this event could not be failed. Because Bai Xiaoli was likely to use the mysterious factor to break the seal. This was the result of countless generations of struggle. Even the Sacred Land Lord's eyes showed that they were ready to die. In order to help the Patriarch escape, these people from the Holy Lands were willing to die. No one knew how much time had passed. The passage was incomparably long. The concept of time and space did not seem to exist here. As the destructive aura became more and more intense, as the powerful fluctuations came, everyone finally arrived at the place where heaven burial was. The vast and endless ruins were incomparably desolate. They could see the broken original stars on the ground. In the sky, there was a belt of broken stars that slowly floated. At the same time, there was an unknown and terrifying aura that permeated the entire space. It was despairing and powerful. A relatively safe path had already been opened up here a long time ago. The Sacred Landlords and the others had already entered 1,000,000 years ago. They knew this place the best. They reminded everyone to be careful along the way. Their expressions were solemn. They could not even make the slightest mistake in their footstep. Because there was only a small space here, it was absolutely safe. Even if they took a wrong step, they would pay with their lives. Here, even the Divine King experts could feel how small they were. Everyone's expression was very solemn. However, Feng Ling was at the back. Seeing Bai Yu standing obediently beside Lin Yu, there was an unknown flame in his heart. His eyes were filled with malice. In the sky, there was an aura of extermination. Flying was not allowed. Hence, everyone had been walking on the barren land for a few months. At this moment, a huge altar appeared in front of them. Behind the altar, there was an endless mist. At the same time, Lin Yu could sense that there was a strong aura of origin material in the mist. Presumably, the final location of the battle was behind this fog. Many factions had already arrived on this huge altar a long time ago. As for the world behind the mist, it could only be completely opened by gathering the 10 ancient badges. Chapter 1152. The forces in the black mist saw the beings from the 10-direction world arrive. They cackled eerily. At the same time, the other two forces showed hostility toward the 10-direction world's holy landlord. Hee, you guys have arrived in this world, and yet you still dare to appear. Behind the living being in the black fog, there were more than 10 living beings who exuded powerful auras. There was no doubt that the living beings here were all demons because of the arrangement of the 10 demon monarchs. As for the humans of the 10 great Holy Lands, perhaps only the 10 great worlds still had a few survivors. Your 10-direction world has truly fallen. You even brought 2 human ants with you. The leader of the Black Mist looked at Patriarch Lu and Lin Yu with disdain. What does that have to do with you? The leader of the 10-direction world's Holy Land looked at him coldly, his tone hostile. The being in the Black Mist didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed. It seems that the 10-direction world's spirit hasn't diminished after 1,000,000 years. This time, you won't get lucky. Think about it seriously. Your 3 palace masters are my cauldrons. Perhaps I'll consider letting your 10-direction world go. Oh right, there are 2 more ants. The being in the Black Mist revealed his ferocious appearance. Though he had the body of a human, his head was indescribable. He had fish gills, cow horns, and eyes like bronze bells. Patriarch Lu didn't respond to the being's provocation. Ancestor Lu didn't say anything, and Lin Yu also stepped forward. 2 blazing sword lights enveloped the entire altar and slashed at the Holy Spirit. To Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu, the only response they had was to call the being an ant. The creature in the black fog hadn't expected that the 2 ants it had mentioned would actually risk universal condemnation and attack it directly. Patriarch Lu wasn't going to tolerate being humiliated by the second palace master. No matter where they were or what faction they were facing, he would make them pay with blood. The remaining people in the 10-direction world were shocked by Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu's actions. Their 10-square world was weak to begin with. Although they were furious that the creature in the black fog had insulted the 3 palace masters, they did not dare to take action. In everyone's eyes, they were full of admiration for Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu. Bai Yu's eyes were filled with anticipation. She clenched her fists in excitement. You dare to act rashly on the altar? Clearly, the creatures in the black fog hadn't expected this. As for Patriarch Lu and Lin Yu, the remaining forces did not step forward to stop them. Clearly, they were very happy to see this scene. They hadn't even entered the world behind the fog, but their forces had already been depleted. This was good news for them. How dare you! At this moment, the person behind the black fog creature charged out in rage. Are you all planning to start the battle on the altar ahead of time? The being in the black fog roared. However, the only response he got was the blazing immortal sword. Senior Patriarch Lu, I'll hold back these scum. You kill him. Lin Yu stood in the middle, his tone indifferent. Patriarch Lu nodded slightly. Among all the forces of the Sacred Lands, only the Holy Lords and a few others remained calm. The rest were so shocked that their jaws dropped to the ground. These 2 humans were a little too ferocious. Without wasting any time, they raised their hands and declared that they would kill the Holy Lords of the Netherworld. The 10 Sacred Lands were divided into the 10-square world, the Netherworld, the Green Wave World, the Ancient Vase World, the Remnant Spirit World, the Godly Gaze World, the Turbid Immortal World, the Bitter Sea World, the Opposite Shore World, and the Gauchian World. The forces that had besieged the previous Holy Lords of the 10-square world were the Netherworld, the Ancient Vase World, and the Turbid Immortal World. At this moment, Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu were facing the forces of the Netherworld. In the face of Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu's casual words, the Nether Realm Holy Lord felt that he was being looked down upon and was incomparably enraged. You 2 ants are too arrogant. However, Patriarch Lu had locked onto the Holy Lords of the Netherworld. The immortal sword in his hand exploded with murderous intent. In just 3 moves, the Holy Lords of the Netherworld were bleeding. On the other hand, Lin Yu held the Emperor's sword in his hand and directly cut off the battlefield. At this moment, he was able to stop the remaining Divine King Realm experts at the edge of the altar all by himself. Among them, there were 2 Overgod experts. Lin Yu did not seem to be at a disadvantage. He was still facing them calmly. This caused all the powers to reveal astonishment in their eyes. These 2 humans were way too strong, weren't they? Just the two of them had the momentum to suppress the forces of a sacred land. It could be seen that the holy lords of the netherworld were suppressed by Patriarch Lu and could only passively resist. Even one of his horns had been chopped off. Only half of it was left. No one doubted that it would not take long before the holy lords of the netherworld were killed by Patriarch Lu's immortal sword. The two of them were too domineering. Just because the holy lords of the netherworld mocked them, they directly attacked without giving them any chance. Until the holy lords of the netherworld were severely injured. At this moment, the forces of the ancient vase realm and the turbid immortal realm attacked. They wanted to stop Patriarch Lu and Lin Yu. At this moment, the other forces also spoke up and blocked Patriarch Lu's immortal sword. This place was filled with an aura of destruction. If they killed someone here, it was very likely that there would be a huge problem. Although some forces were happy to see this scene. However, for safety reasons, they all intervened and stopped this battle. Patriarch Lu and Lin Yu calmly withdrew their swords. They returned to the 10-direction realm. Why were you beaten to such a state by the ant you spoke of? Lin Yu looked at the holy lords of the netherworld, who had fallen to the ground and was being helped up by the god kings behind him. He completely disregarded the dignity of the netherworld. After entering the world behind the mist, I will let you know what despair is. The holy lords of the netherworld almost spat out a mouthful of blood in anger upon hearing Lin Yu's words. I look forward to it, Lin Yu calmly replied. With the arrival of the last force from the opposite shore realm, no one hesitated. The holy lords of the 10 holy lands stepped forward and took out their ancient badges. Whoosh! 10 blazing ancient light beams converged at one spot, dispersing the mist behind the altar for a short period of time. Go in. The holy lords of the 10-direction realm spoke at this moment. The mist was temporarily dispersed. The holy lords of the 10 holy lands allowed everyone to enter. As more and more forces entered, the mist began to gradually recede. Finally, this place returned to its original appearance. Before entering, the holy lords of the netherworld looked at Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu. The killing intent in his eyes was no longer concealed. It was tangible. Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu didn't pay much attention to this killing intent. This was because the 10-direction realm and the netherworld were already mortal enemies. There was nothing wrong with teaching them a lesson in advance. Chapter 1153. The world behind the mist was extremely mysterious. Due to the ancient edicts of their respective forces, they were teleported to different regions. This mysterious world was extremely vast. They only had one goal, and that was to enter the depths and obtain the mysterious factor. Therefore, even if they didn't deliberately search for it, they would still meet at the final destination. At this moment, Lin Yu voiced his concerns to the leader of the Holy Land, Patriarch Lu, and the others. When we fought just now, I didn't seem to sense the aura of the progenitor realm among the forces of the nether realm. Could it be that they're deliberately hiding it? The third palace lord said. Because the aura of extinction outside the altar might have restricted the progenitor realm, causing the nether realm to be suppressed, he didn't make a move. Patriarch Lu, on the other hand, rejected this idea. He himself possessed the Tao laws of the progenitor realm. I didn't sense the aura of the progenitor realm behind the forces of the nether realm. However, there are progenitor realm experts in the ancient vase realm and the opposite shore realm. Patriarch Lu slowly said. Although his cultivation was only at the peak of the overgod realm, his comprehension of the progenitor realm was much stronger than that of ordinary progenitor realm experts. Therefore, he was able to sense the aura of the other progenitor realm experts when they fought just now. The leader of the Holy Land nodded slightly. She had changed her opinion of Patriarch Lu when he stepped in to protect the 10-direction realm, and her tone was gentler now. Don't let your guard down, Lin Yu finally said. The threat that the underworld realm's sacred master had uttered wasn't baseless. Lin Yu already had a bad premonition in his heart. It's very likely that these three forces are secretly working together to attack us. This was the most troublesome matter. This was because the previous Holy Lord of the Ten-Direction Realm had died 1,000,000 years ago because of this. Although Patriarch Lu was overseeing things now, his cultivation base had fallen. Even if he could restrain the Progenitor Realm experts, it would be too difficult for him to defeat them, and he might have to pay a huge price. "We've let you down," the leader of the Holy Land finally said. "Don't worry, you didn't do anything wrong. Patriarch Lu didn't pursue the matter. In that case, we should take the initiative and defeat them one by one." Lin Yu voiced his opinion. Everyone from Nintendo couldn't help but look at Lin Yu. This idea was undoubtedly too bold. If they had joined forces in advance, the 10-square world would have been annihilated. But at the moment there was no better way. Ancestor Lu nodded and agreed to Lin Yu's proposal. This was the only way to have a chance of winning in the final destination. In order to obtain the mysterious factor, he would not hesitate to use any means. At this time, the specific location of the Nether Holy Land appeared in Lin Yu's hand. A blurry light appeared on Lin Yu's hand, pointing in a certain direction. "So, you already left a trick on the dark underworld Holy Land?" Bai Yu covered her mouth, feeling incredulous. "Since I've already made my move, I might as well leave some cards up my sleeve." Lin Yu's lips curled into a faint smile. The three palace masters' faces were filled with astonishment. At the same time, they sighed inwardly. As expected, the ancestor has his own reasons for bringing him here. Perhaps, with Lin Yu's participation in this event, we might really obtain the mysterious factor. They looked at Lin Yu with admiration in their eyes. "In that case, let's go and hunt the dark underworld Holy Land," Ancestor Lu said slowly. They looked at the direction that Lin Yu's finger pointed at the same time. After completely concealing their auras, they quickly headed in that direction. "The Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld Holy Land can't go out alive." Ancestor Lu stood on the immortal sword and said slowly to the second palace master. Because of what the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld said to the second palace master, he was already a corpse in Ancestor Lu's eyes. The second palace master nodded slightly and looked at Ancestor Lu's side face in a daze. 3 days had passed. In the faint mist, the people of the Dark Underworld Holy Land appeared in front of Lin Yu and the others. However, looking at the people of the Dark Underworld Holy Land, they seemed to have a purpose. At this moment, the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld had an ancient compass in his hand that was pointing at a certain direction. Moreover, there was a look of surprise on his face. He seemed to be hopeful about what was ahead. Lin Yu and the others clearly saw the expression of the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld Holy Land. The ancestor is not dead. He is now in the depths of the burial of heavens. At this moment, the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld Holy Land spoke. When the others of the Dark Underworld Holy Land heard this, they all bowed in the same direction. "I see. The ancestor of the Dark Underworld Holy Land did not leave the burial of heavens 1,000,000 years ago." At this moment, the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld Holy Land spoke. When the ancestor of the Dark Underworld Holy Land joined forces to besiege the 10-direction world, he was already at the peak of the Overgod realm. Now, he had stayed in the burial of heavens for 1,000,000 years. There were rich origin materials here. After 1,000,000 years, he had probably broken through to the ancestor realm. Without a doubt, this was bad news. However, Lin Yu and the others had already made a plan. None of the people of the Dark Underworld Holy Land could escape today. At this moment, the 3 palace masters and Bai Yu took out the artifact in Bai Yu's hand that was passed down by Bai Xiaoli. A profound aura instantly enveloped the surrounding 100 miles. This place was quickly sealed. It was not until 2 hours later that the people of the Dark Underworld Holy Land realized that something was wrong. However, it was all too late. It seems like we have been standing in place and not moving forward. Someone in the dark underworld Holy Land said with a deep frown. At this moment, Ancestor Lu and the others slowly walked forward. They were all filled with killing intent. At this moment, the falsified heaven mark on Lin Yu's hand also slowly dissipated. Long time no see. Lin Yu slowly said to the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld. You! At this moment, the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld Holy Land revealed a look of surprise. What he did not expect was that the people of the 10 Square World dared to leave a tracking method on them and evade all detection. Because they wanted to awaken their ancestor, they did not meet up with the other forces in advance. Now that they had already seen the strength of the 2 humans of the 10 Square World, if they were to face them head-on, they had no chance of winning. The Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld Holy Land's face was as cold as ice. Although he looked ferocious, there was no trace of blood on his face. However, he did not believe that the 10 Square World would let them go so easily after so long. A battle was inevitable. Ancestor Lu did not give them the slightest chance. Holding the immortal sword in his hand, he directly attacked the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld. In just a moment after arriving in this world, there was nothing to worry about. Ancestor Lu heavily injured the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld with a single sword strike. Lin Yu and the others also attacked. It was a one-sided battle. The battle did not last long. Although the battle was very intense, this world was very vast. On the barren land there were corpses and bones everywhere. The Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld was already decapitated under Ancestor Lu's sword. The 3 palace masters found the token that connected the ancient pot sacred ground and the turbid immortal sacred ground from the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld. At this moment, the Holy Lord of the Dark Underworld's body suddenly burst out with dazzling light. Then, he flew uncontrollably to an unknown place in the distance. Ancestor Lu slashed out with his sword, wanting to stop him. However, although the light was split into 2, it quickly merged back into 1. There was no time for anyone to react. When the light rushed into a secret place, the stone skin on a sculpture slowly peeled off. A hoarse voice sounded. 1,000,000 years have passed? Then, the sculpture revealed its emotions. Who destroyed the Dark Underworld Holy Land? Chapter 1154. The old ancestor of the Netherworld Sacred Ground's eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. Although he did not know who killed the Netherworld Sacred Lord and the others, he had to avenge them. However, he still needed some time to recover. Fortunately, the Netherworld Sacred Lord had locked onto the aura of Lin Yu and the others before he died. The day I recover will be the day you die. The old ancestor of the Netherworld's sacred ground gradually fell into a deep slumber. Lin Yu and the others did not know about this. They had already sent a message to the ancient pot sacred ground and were waiting for the fish to take the bait. Lin Yu and the others had already set up countless traps. The ancient pot sacred ground had already received the message. The Netherworld sacred ground had already found the location of the group from the 10 Square World. They were waiting for them to come and kill them. This hatred that had lasted for 1,000,000 years would be completely eliminated. The ancient pot sacred ground has already sent back a message. They will be here in a month. The 10 Square World Sacred Lord said with joy in his eyes. After waiting for 1,000,000 years, he finally had the chance to take revenge. Master, we will be able to avenge you soon. The 3 palace masters' eyes were filled with tears. The scene from 1,000,000 years ago was still imprinted in their minds and could never be erased. However, we can't stay here for too long. Otherwise, the ancient pot sacred ground will be suspicious. Lin Yu said slowly, expressing his worries. The 3 palace masters nodded in agreement. After a short rest, they cleaned up the corpses of the Netherworld sacred ground. Then, the group from the 10 Square World continued to move forward. Since the previous Sacred Lord of the Netherworld Sacred Ground has been hiding in the Heaven Burial Ground, The ancient pot's sacred ground must have some tricks up their sleeve. We must be careful. The third palace master reminded them as they moved forward. A month passed quickly. Ancestor Lu's divine sense covered a radius of 100 miles. At this moment, he sensed danger approaching. "They're here," he said casually. At this moment, Lin Yu and the others had transformed into the appearance of the Netherworld's sacred lord. The three palace masters brought Bai Yu with them and used the supreme divine weapon given by Xiaoli to set up restrictions around the area. The people from the ancient pot's sacred ground also concealed their aura. They were worried that they would expose themselves and alert the enemy. Because Lin Yu and the others had spread the news that the Netherworld's sacred ground had been secretly following the 10 Square World. They were waiting for the people from the ancient pot and turbid immortal sacred ground to arrive. At this time, Lin Yu had already taken out the communication token in his hand and asked the people of the ancient pot holy ground to gather here first. Friends from the Netherworld's sacred ground? The sacred lord of the ancient pot's sacred ground came. The creatures of the ancient pot holy ground all had human heads and snake bodies. Their diamond-shaped pupils were bloodthirsty and cold. Anyone who looked at them would feel a chill run down their spine. Fellow Taoists. At this moment, Lin Yu, who had transformed into the Nether Holy Lord, walked forward with a smile. God grounds s. The sacred lord of the ancient pot's sacred ground was cautious. He looked at Lin Yu and the others. I've already set up a tracking method on the 10 Square World survivors. Fellow Taoist ancient pot, don't worry. Lin Yu said calmly. They're just 100 miles ahead. I see. The ancient pot's sacred lord nodded. But I wonder why the Netherworld's sacred ground is missing a few people? Not long ago we accidentally entered a dangerous place and lost a few people. Lin Yu explained. It's a pity that the Netherworld's sacred ground is in such a predicament. The ancient pot's sacred lord said. A little sacrifice is inevitable in order to save the old ancestor. Lin Yu shook his head. Although he couldn't bear to see the Netherworld's sacred lord, he still said magnanimously. Then, Lin Yu's Nether Holy Lord seemed to have thought of something and asked with concern, Old Holy Lord Gu Hu, have you found him? Hearing Nether Saint Lord's question, ancient pot Saint Lord's worries were completely dispelled. The old Saint Lord is in the depths of this world. He still needs some time to recover. Lin Yu nodded slowly. The two old sacred lords have great perseverance. I'm sure they've achieved great things. The mysterious factor this time will belong to us. Lin Yu also learned from the ancient pot sacred lord that the ancient pot sacred lord and the old sacred lord of the Netherworld sacred ground were still in the depths of this world. They needed someone to wake him up. In this case, the 10 Square Worlds plan was flawless. Why haven't the people of the turbid immortal sacred ground arrived yet? Lin Yu asked. I don't know. The ancient pot's sacred lord frowned. Those guys are never in a hurry. Could it be that they've gone to the depths because the old sacred lord is in there? Lin Yu asked in the form of the dark Nether Saint Lord. Lin Yu reminded the ancient pot sacred lord. The ancient pot sacred lord was suddenly enlightened. Those guys, are they going to betray us? Taoist Nether, if that's the case, let's work together and eliminate the remnants of the 10 Square World first. Then, we'll wake up the old sacred lord. The ancient pot sacred lord made a prompt decision. I was thinking the same thing. Lin Yu, who was in the form of the dark Nether sacred lord, nodded. Lin Yu had ancient pot sacred lord fall into his trap with just a few words. The remnants of the 10 Square World are now 1,000 miles away. Let's not waste any time. Taoist ancient pot, let's hurry over. Lin Yu, who had transformed into the Netherworld's sacred lord, had a murderous look in his eyes. I must make them pay a painful price for the blood feud on the altar. The ancient pot sacred lord was stunned. He didn't expect the Nether sacred lord to bring it up. He couldn't help but smile. The Nether sacred lord was beaten up too badly on the altar. He was practically the laughingstock of the 10 great sacred grounds. However, the ancient pot sacred lord thought that the nether sacred lord might have brought it up intentionally. He was a little annoyed that the ancient pot sacred ground didn't help him on the altar. Let's put in more effort to eliminate the remnants of the 10 square world. The ancient pot sacred lord thought. If the 2 sacred grounds worked together, even the 2 humans of the 10 square world wouldn't be able to do anything to them, no matter how strong they were. However, the ancient pot sacred lord didn't know who would be the meat on the chopping block. With Lin Yu and the rest of the people from the 10-direction world leading the way, it didn't take them long to cover the distance of 1,000 li, Taoist nether. Why don't I see the remnants of the 10 square world? The ancient gourd holy master finally realized that something was amiss. His brows were tightly knitted together. Aren't the remnants of the 10 square world you mentioned here? The figures of Lin Yu and the others slowly changed. It's you, the human expert from the 10 square world. The ancient pot sacred lord's expression changed. They finally realized that they had fallen into a trap. But it's too late for you to realize it now. The 3 palace masters also revealed themselves in the void at that moment. You've already destroyed the nether sacred ground? The ancient pot sacred lord finally realized something. His face was filled with fear. Since the sacred grounds are plotting against the 10 square world, there's no need for you to continue living in this world. The 10 square world's sacred lord said coldly. Do you still remember how many lives of the 10 square world were stained with your blood 1,000,000 years ago? Chapter 1155. The Sacred Lord of 10 Square World clearly remembered that the current Sacred Lord of Ancient Pot had killed many of her fellow disciples 1,000,000 years ago. The sins she had committed in 10 Square World were too numerous to be recorded. The 3 palace masters stood out at the same time. Their auras shrouded the Ancient Pot Sacred Lord. Ancestor Lu stood at the side. The immortal slaying sword in his hand gave off a terrifying aura. Everyone from the ancient pot sacred ground retreated. When they were on the altar, they had already experienced how terrifying Ancestor Lu was. But now, everything within a circumference of 100 miles had been sealed off. The ancient pot sacred ground was doomed. The besieged ancient pot sacred lord was covered in blood in no time. His entire arm was smashed into pieces by the combined efforts of the 3 palace masters. The 3 palace masters had witnessed the tragic deaths of their fellow disciples and their master 1,000,000 years ago. Now that they were facing their enemies, they had to use their strongest technique. Even the ancient pot sacred lord, who was at the peak of the overgod realm, could not fight back against the attacks of the 3 palace masters. The battle lasted for a long time. Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu seemed to be unstoppable at this moment. Facing the remaining 4 Divine King Realm cultivators, they were completely overpowered. In less than 2 hours, they had killed all the Divine King Realm cultivators. Facing their enemies, the living beings of 10 Square World were furious. They could not wait to devour the flesh and blood of the people from the ancient pot sacred ground. In the end, the ancient pot sacred lord shouted. At this moment, the rest of the people from the ancient pot holy grounds were bursting forth with a terrifying power. Then, under the control of the ancient pot sacred lord, they all exploded into blood mist. Endless energy gathered towards the ancient pot sacred lord. The ancient pot sacred lord's cultivation base was rising steadily. In the end, he was almost at the ancestor realm. At this moment, the 3 palace masters were sent flying. The ancient pot sacred lord was going to make his last stand. Ancestor Lu appeared in the sky, isolating the terrifying aura. Then, he slashed out with his sword. Endless sword chi turned into an ocean and enveloped the ancient pot sacred lord. No! The ancient pot sacred leader screamed in fear. His voice was extremely shrill. But it was all in vain. After the sword chi, the world fell into silence. The gray sky descended again. The ancient pot holy ground was completely destroyed. The blood rain that filled the sky sprinkled down, but Ancestor Lu and the 3 palace masters stood in the middle, untainted by a speck of dust. No one had expected that 2 holy lands would be completely wiped out in just a few months after entering this world. After doing all this, Lin Yu and the others did not continue to contact the turbid immortal Holy Land because they had already obtained the exact information. In the turbid immortal Holy Land, there were ancestor realm powerhouses now. However, now that there was only the turbid immortal Holy Land left, the pressure on the 10-square world would undoubtedly be much less. Next, we need to improve our overall strength. The 10-direction world discovered a secret place in this world, said the 10-direction world's Saint Lord. We have 100 years left. This was also the main reason why the 10 great holy lands would bring talented youths into the sky burial ground. Although this place was dangerous, it was also accompanied by great fortune. The rich origin substance could allow a person to advance quickly. This was what Bai Xiaoli had told Lin Yu when they were in the 12 universes. It could allow him to break through quickly and deal with the invasion of the 10th universe. It took them a year to arrive at the secret place mentioned by the 10-direction world's Saint Lord. This place looked very ordinary, no different from the other regions. However, as the 10-direction world's Saint Lord walked forward, a mysterious power appeared in his palm. It seemed like a layer of restriction had been opened. Endless origin substance began to pour into the secret place. Let's go in. We'll cultivate here for 100 years. After 100 years, what we'll face will not be as simple as the turbid immortal Holy Land. The 10-direction world's Saint Lord said worriedly. Their opponents would be the other holy lands in the final battle for the mysterious factor. Although there was no enmity between them, when it came to the mysterious factor, there was no friend or foe to speak of. The final battle in the deepest part of the secret place was bound to be bloody. Bai Yu and the others' eyes were solemn. They sensed the rich origin substance. Without hesitation, they stepped into the secret place. Although Bai Yu still wanted to follow Lin Yu before entering, she was rejected by him. The most important thing now was to use the origin substance to increase their strength. It was not the time to talk about love. Bai Yu's face was filled with unconcealable sadness, but she quickly recovered. At the same time, she realized that her thoughts were too childish. "Senior, I'm sorry. I didn't know the severity of the matter." Bai Yu apologized sincerely. Lin Yu shook his head. However, after experiencing 100,000 years of reincarnation, he understood that he would not easily accept a woman's love. The group separated and agreed to meet again after 100 years. As Lin Yu entered the depths of the origin substance, everything returned to normal. Lin Yu could clearly feel that the origin substance in his body that he had refined a long time ago was moving. It seemed to be cheering as it sensed the same substance. As Lin Yu moved forward, Lin Yu also realized that the origin substance here seemed to be different from what he had absorbed and refined in the 12 universes. It seemed that the origin substance of the 12 universes was more primitive and the power nurtured in it was purer. Lin Yu also guessed something at this moment. Perhaps this was why the 10th universe sent the Divine King Realm cultivators over at all costs. This was because the origin substance of the 12 universes was more primitive and had greater benefits for the powerhouses. However, the origin substance here was very rich and could make up for the difference in quality. Lin Yu followed the guidance of the origin substance in his body and found the place where the origin substance was the richest. Without hesitation, he took out the Emperor's sword and placed it beside him. Then, he activated the cultivation technique in his body and began to absorb the origin substance here. Like a whale swallowing a cow, the origin substance here directly turned into a huge vortex and appeared above Lin Yu's head. The impurities in it were eliminated and entered Lin Yu's body at a shocking speed. If anyone saw this scene, their jaws would definitely drop to the ground. This kind of speed was simply too shocking. Perhaps even the progenitor realm cultivators could not absorb the origin substance at such a speed. At this moment, Lin Yu's body was already suffused with a white halo. It was incomparably sacred. And now, the precipitation had almost reached the limit and could no longer be suppressed. Lin Yu recalled his previous cultivation realm and made it completely flawless. Then, an even more terrifying absorption speed attack. At this moment, Lin Yu had completely broken through to the Overgod realm and was standing at the peak of the Divine King realm. However, after breaking through to the Divine King realm, Lin Yu did not stop but continued to absorb the origin substance. His cultivation realm was rising at a speed visible to the naked eye. This was because he had already broken through to the progenitor realm when he was in the Saint realm. At this moment, as long as he had enough origin substance to precipitate, breaking through to the progenitor realm would be a matter of course. It was just that after reaching the Divine King realm, each breakthrough would take a long time and could no longer be measured in years. However, the time given to Lin Yu was not that much. He had to have the strength to wipe out all enemies before the invasion of the 10th universe. At this moment, he had to raise his strength so that he could successfully obtain the mysterious factor that Bai Xiaoli needed. Chapter 1156. At this moment, someone finally noticed the disturbance in the depths of the secret place. Lin Yu's rate of absorption and refinement was just too intense. All the origin matter in the boundless region gathered towards him. The origin matter turned into a storm that swept through the entire secret place. It did not calm down for a very long time. Who has caused such a disturbance? The three palace masters, who had high cultivation, unconsciously looked at the location where Lin Yu was cultivating. Although they had guessed something, they could not help but reveal shocked expressions in the face of such a scene. Is it that young man again? Patriarch Lu stood in the secret place and looked in Lin Yu's direction as he said slowly. 100 years passed in a flash. Lin Yu, who had been sitting in silence for 100 years, opened his eyes at this moment. The depth in his eyes flashed. Time had not left any traces on him. He was young again. He stood up slowly and drew the Emperor's sword from the side. Old friend. Lin Yu looked at the Emperor's sword that had become more and more wondrous. Due to the baptism of the origin matter, the Emperor's sword had undergone a metamorphosis. It now possessed a simple intelligence. It could sense that Lin Yu had regained control over it. It trembled with joy. Lin Yu smiled faintly. It was now the day they had agreed upon. Lin Yu looked at the unknown place in front of him. It seemed that the fluctuations of mysterious factors had begun to appear in this world. Is the final battle about to begin? There was no fear in Lin Yu's eyes at all. Instead, there was eagerness. He wanted to test himself and see what level his battle prowess had reached. Lin Yu was currently at the peak of Overgod. His body and senses of the soul were both flawless. He was much more powerful than regular Overgods. Lin Yu guessed that he should be able to defeat Overgods easily with his current strength. He might even be able to put up a fight against half-step progenitors. His figure disappeared from where he stood. In just a short time, they had already arrived at the periphery of the secret land. Ancestor Lu and the others had already been waiting here for a long time. Congratulations, God King Lin. Your cultivation base has improved. At this moment, the three palace masters stepped forward and congratulated Lin Yu on his breakthrough into the God King realm. I was lucky. Lin Yu returned the greeting. At this time, the rest of the people in the 10-square world also came out of seclusion one after another. 100 years had passed, and their cultivations had all made significant progress. This was especially true for Baiyu. With their current realms, it was merely 100 years. On the other hand, Baiyu's cultivation had broken through 2 levels and reached the late-stage Sage realm. However, this caused the 3 palace masters to be filled with worry. Not only the 3 palace masters, but Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu had also discovered the hidden dangers. Bai Yu's breakthrough had been too rushed, causing her cultivation to be unstable. It was very likely that it would have an unimaginable impact on her future cultivation. "Why are you so stupid?" The 3 palace masters had reproachful looks on their faces. "I want to do my part in the final battle," Bai Yu said. "I don't want all of you to face danger alone." Although the 3 palace masters were gratified, their expressions were solemn. "You are the hope of the 10-square world. We brought you here to gain experience. You don't have to worry about the mysterious factor." The 10-square world's holy lord's expression was solemn. "It's very kind of you to have such intentions. We are very gratified." The 2nd palace master stroked the back of Bai Yu's hand and said slowly. Bai Yu lowered her head and replied, "Second master, little you understands." They didn't stop. After opening the secret place, they went deeper into the secret place. However, their eyes were filled with worry. The old Nether Holy Lord must have awakened by now. In the entire 10-square world, there was no one who could rival him. "Brother Lu, please keep this." At this moment, the 2nd palace master stepped forward and handed the bracelet in Bai Yu's hand to Ancestor Lu. "This is what we all agreed upon." The 10-square world's holy lord nodded. When Patriarch Lu had made a move on the altar for the sake of the 2nd Imperial Empress, her opinion of him had changed completely. Now, she handed the supreme artifact that Bai Xiaoli had passed down to Patriarch Lu so that he would have a way to deal with the progenitor realm experts in the future. "Do you believe me now?" Patriarch Lu said with a smile. "It's just that I have no choice but to do this in order to obtain the mysterious factor." The 10-square world's holy lord didn't want to be outdone. His expression turned cold again. Patriarch Lu only smiled faintly. However, he still kept the supreme artifact. Although he was joking, he knew what they were going to face in the following situation. What they didn't know was that at the end of the world there were already 2 old figures standing there. They looked like they had crawled out of a grave, exuding a rotten aura. One of them had ox horns and fish gills, while the other had a snake head and a human body. Both of them exuded a terrifying aura. It seemed like the destructive aura here didn't have much effect on the 2 of them. "Our cultivation here for 1,000,000 years was not in vain. Congratulations, old friend, for breaking through to the progenitor realm," the old holy lord of the ancient gourd holy ground said. "However, our disciples and grand disciples are all dead." The old holy lord of the nether holy ground sighed. "The old ancestors already sensed it 1,000,000 years ago. This grand meeting is extremely important. That's why we didn't hesitate to pay the price and stayed here. A little sacrifice is nothing." The old holy lord of the ancient gourd holy ground spoke again. It was as if one couldn't see the emotions of a living being from his body. "The aura of the 10-square world has appeared." At this moment, 2 beams of light burst out from the old holy lord of the nether holy ground, shattering the void. The silhouettes of Lin Yu and the others were reflected in their eyes. Patriarch Lu's gaze suddenly looked in a certain direction. "They have already sensed us." This caused everyone's expressions to become unsightly. However, Patriarch Lu's next words made everyone feel as if they were in an ice cellar. "There are 2 progenitor realm experts. They should be the 2 from the ancient gourd holy ground and nether holy ground. Now that they have awakened, they have met up with each other." Patriarch Lu had cultivated in the secret place for 100 years. His cultivation realm had recovered to some extent. Naturally, his divine senses were not the same as before. "It seems like there is another powerful expert in the 10-square world," the old holy lord of the ancient gourd holy ground said slowly. "Let's go and meet these juniors. I wonder if they'll be able to walk out of this world alive without the protection of their master." Then, the 2 of them turned into dim lights and rapidly approached the people from the 10-square world. This speed was beyond the scope of knowledge of living beings. In almost an instant they had crossed a large area. "They are here." Patriarch Lu's brows were tightly knitted together at this moment. Although they had noticed that the ancient gourd Holy Lord had spread the news during the battle to destroy the ancient gourd Holy Ground, they had neglected the connection between the two old Holy Lords of the ancient gourd Holy Ground. Lin Yu was very calm because he had already expected this. It was just that he had no way to deal with it. What he could do before entering was already the best plan. Use all your strength to get closer to the depths, Lin Yu said. Let's hope that the distance between them can support us until we reach the depths where the mysterious factor exists. Lin Yu sighed. When the time comes, we can only rely on you to stop the two of them. This was the best plan at the moment. Without a plan, they could only compete with their speed. Patriarch Lu gave his imperial sword art to Lin Yu. In the 10-square world, only he and Lin Yu had the highest cultivation realm and could support the consumption of the imperial sword art. This was because Lin Yu's not heaven needed to leave a mark in order to unleash its maximum speed. If he used it normally, it would not be as fast as the imperial sword art. With Lin Yu's talent, he quickly grasped the imperial sword art. Lin Yu and Patriarch Lu each led a group of people and rushed towards the depths. How did their speed suddenly become so fast? The old Holy Lord of the ancient gourd Holy Ground was puzzled. Chapter 1157. Ancestor Lu's swordsmanship was the best since ancient times, and the profoundness of the sword-controlling technique was unparalleled. In terms of speed, even if a divine king displayed it, even an ancestor would find it hard to match. Although Lin Yu had just grasped it, in terms of speed, it was also extremely fast. It was as if the ground had shrunk into an inch, and in the blink of an eye, it was unknown how far they had traveled. But even so, Ancestor Lu's brows were tightly knitted, because he had already sensed that the two Holy Lords of the Nether Holy Land and Ancient Pot Holy Land were getting closer and closer to them. And they seemed to be able to sense the specific location of the people of the 10-square world. No one knew what the reason was. The only possibility was that before the Holy Lord of the Nether Holy Land was killed, he had left some kind of mark on one of them. And they all knew that now all the Holy Lands were heading towards the depths to fight for the mysterious factor. They only needed to block in front, and the people of the 10-square world would walk right into the trap. Lin Yu was also sighing lightly at this time. In the end, they would encounter the two ancestor, it was just a matter of time. This world was very vast. A few days had passed, and Lin Yu and the others had already traveled an unknown distance. They only sensed that the aura of the mysterious factor in front had become stronger and stronger, reflecting on the entire dusky sky. It was colorful, with an aura that made people fascinated. And around the mysterious factor, there was also a rich origin substance that could not be dissolved. Sensing from afar, Lin Yu already knew that the quality and quantity of the origin substance here had completely surpassed the origin substance that was absorbed and refined in the secret place before, until a deep abyss appeared in front of them, stretching for an unknown distance. Below him was a black fog that could frighten one's mind. It was like a black dragon that was rolling around. There was only a broken cable bridge between the two parts of the final destination. There were already forces fighting on it, and even a great battle had already broken out. There were not many living beings who entered the burial place, but now, for the mysterious factor, they were all willing to pay any price. Even if they fell into the abyss, they would drag someone down with them. Endless power was vented on the chain bridge. This was a great battle between Ancestor Realm experts. It was the hidden Ancestor Realm experts of the Green Wave Realm and the Bitter Sea Realm who were fighting at this time. The chain bridge was shaking violently, on the verge of collapse due to the battle between the two Ancestor Realm experts. A large number of living beings from other forces also suffered an unexpected calamity and fell into the abyss one after another. Even a Saint Realm expert was so insignificant in the abyss that he couldn't even resist. The abyss had a mysterious and majestic power. No matter what your cultivation was, it was difficult to resist. At this moment, two heart-palpitating auras appeared at the starting point of the chain bridge. The figure had a cruel smile on his face. 10 Direction World's remnants, you're finally here. Yu Ming and the old holy masters of the ancient Pot Holy Land said slowly. Clearly, this was the only way to reach the final destination. This cable bridge was the only way. There was no other way. Netherworld and the old holy master of the ancient Pot Holy Land had already used all of their cultivation bases to rush over. Everyone from the 10 Square World wore a solemn expression as they stared at the two figures in front of them who were emitting terrifying auras. Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu were as calm as an ancient well. At this time, they slowly stood up. 2 ants at the peak of the Divine King Realm want to stop us? The old holy master of the ancient Pot Holy Land and the old holy master of the ancient Pot Holy Land said coldly. When the old holy master of the ancient Pot Holy Land looked at Ancestor Lu, his expression changed slightly. You're the one who sensed our presence, right? It's not like I haven't killed an Ancestor Realm cultivator before, Ancestor Lu said casually. At this time, he looked directly at the two without the slightest fear. Ancestor Lu had broken through to the Ancestor Realm a long time ago. It was only because he was on the way to the Heavenly Island that his cultivation base fell. Otherwise, these two who broke through to the Ancestor Realm with the help of the materials here were nothing. However, now that Ancestor Lu's cultivation base had fallen, it was already very difficult for him to resist an Ancestor Realm cultivator. As for Lin Yu, although his cultivation base had condensed, it was impossible for him to defeat an Ancestor Realm cultivator. A Sage Realm cultivator was like an ant in front of an Ancestor Realm cultivator. Now, the only people who could resist the old holy master of the ancient Pot Holy Land were Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu. Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu only looked at the two indifferently with fearless eyes. Today's battle was unavoidable. Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu knew that if the ancient Pot Holy Land and the Netherworld Holy Land could not deal with it, they would have no chance of winning in the final fight for the mysterious factor. In addition to the ancient Pot Holy Land and the Netherworld Holy Land, they still had to face the other 5 Holy Land. In that case, let's fight. Ancestor Lu looked at the two indifferently. The immortal sword in his hand bloomed with a bright radiance, illuminating the entire universe. The black fog in the abyss retreated at this time, as if it could not withstand the aura of Ancestor Lu's sword light. At this time, the old holy master of the ancient Pot Holy Land and the Netherworld Holy Land's expression changed. This was because Ancestor Lu's aura was really terrifying. In their eyes, although Ancestor Lu's aura was only at the Divine King Realm, when he held the immortal sword in his hand, they vaguely felt that their lives were slipping away. Your realm shouldn't be at the Divine King Realm, the old holy master of the ancient Pot Holy Land said at this time. I guess you must be an Ancestor Realm cultivator before. If you want to fight, why bother talking nonsense? Ancestor Lu was very indifferent from the beginning. He said slowly, his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. In these millions of years, he had been silent for too long. Ancestor Lu was a person who knew his place. Otherwise, he would not have arrived at the 10 great holy lands and fallen in love with the second palace master of the 10 Direction World. He ended up like this. However, in his heart, he did not regret it. At this time, when he entered the place where Heaven Burial was, he did not have the slightest complaint. In his heart, as long as he could be together with the second palace master of the 10 Direction World, it was enough. Even if they could not sleep together in life, they must sleep together in death. Before Ancestor Lu came here, he had already prepared for this. At this time, Ancestor Lu looked at the second palace master. The corner of his mouth was filled with a trace of a smile. In the eyes of the second palace master, it was like 1,000,000 years ago. Senior, we may not be able to get out today. Lin Yu faced the two old holy masters of the ancient Pot Holy Land and the Netherworld Holy Land with a smile, and said half-jokingly. However, in his eyes there was not the slightest trace of fear. The Emperor's sword in his hand trembled slightly, as if it was responding to Lin Yu. It's a pity that I did not meet you in the era of my rise. Otherwise we may be bosom friends. Ancestor Lu looked at Lin Yu and said indifferently. Aren't we bosom friends now? Lin Yu asked rhetorically. That's not wrong. After we get out, let's drink to our heart's content. Ancestor Lu said with a smile at this time. Lin Yu nodded slowly. It would be impolite to decline. At this time, the two of them took a step forward at the same time. The origin material here was retreating, as if it could not withstand the aura emitted by Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu. At this time, the old holy masters of the ancient Pot Holy Land and the Netherworld Holy Land were shocked. Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu's aura was too strong, completely unlike the aura of Divine King Realm cultivators. Chapter 1158. His demeanor and temperament made everyone's expression change. On the other hand, Gu Hu and the old saint of the Netherworld's sacred ground looked at them with disdain. After all, the two of them were just Divine King Realm cultivators. Ants trying to shake a tree. The old Nether Saint Lord and ancient Nether Saint Lord spoke slowly with disdain. Everyone in 10 Square World was worried for Lin Yu because Lin Yu's strength was only at the peak of the Divine King Realm. It was impossible for him to defeat an Ancestor Realm cultivator. This was simply going against the heavens. However, only Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu could stand up against an Ancestor Realm expert. Ancestor Lu had Bai Xiaoli's supreme weapon, so he might be able to end the battle quickly. What Lin Yu needed to do was to stop the old Nether Saint Lord from ancient Nether Saint Lord. Powerful auras radiated from the two old Nether Saint Lords, causing everyone's spirit to hurt and feel like it was being torn apart. Step back, Ancestor Lu said faintly. Sharp sword intent radiated from his body, escorting the people from 10 Square World a few miles away. The battle between Ancestor Realm experts affected a wide area, causing the world to collapse. The people from 10 Square World would only be a burden to Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu. There were also Ancestor-level experts among the several forces in front of them. It was unrealistic to let the people from 10 Square World go ahead first. None of you from 10 Square World can leave today. The old Nether Saint Lord of ancient Nether Saint Lord's lips curled into a cruel smile. With a wave of his hand, he sealed off the area. No one could leave. Back then, your master chose to bring up the rear. Let's see how you can escape now. Hearing the word master, the three Nether Saint Lords' eyes were filled with extreme anger. Especially the third Nether Saint Lord, who was about to step forward and fight. Bastards of the 10 Square World, today, you'll accompany your short-lived teacher. The old Nether Saint Lord of ancient Nether Saint Lord continued. The second Nether Saint Lord held down the third Nether Saint Lord's arm and shook his head slightly. They were only true gods now, so it was futile for them to fight. Even the 10 Direction World's Saint Lords felt a deep sense of powerlessness. Gu Hu and the old master of the dark Nether Sacred Land had stayed in the Sky Burial Ground for 1,000,000 years. Their cultivation bases had long reached the peak. Now that they had broken through to the Ancestor Realm, there was no one in the 10 Great Sacred Lands who could stop them. As long as the two of them joined forces, no one in the entire Sky Burial would be a match for them. Looking at Lin Yu, the ancient Kettle Holy Master did not say anything more. He struck out immediately. An unparalleled amount of power came crashing down on Lin Yu as though the entire heavens were crashing down. The Emperor's sword in Lin Yu's hand exploded with resplendent radiance. At the same time, the Great Void 8 was activated. Lin Yu's first move was a killer move. This was the only way to stop the ancient Pot Holy Master. The ground above the abyss was shaking uncontrollably. Large amounts of gravel were falling down into the endless abyss. There was no sound at all, as if there was no end to this abyss. Lin Yu was sent flying. But what made everyone flabbergasted was that Lin Yu was not injured under the Ancestor Realm's absolute power attack. Moreover, his aura was still blazing. "You're not bad." Even the old Holy Master of the ancient Pod Holy Ground, who was fighting against him, could not help but praise him. And this was just the beginning. Lin Yu faced the ancient Pod Holy Master. The Emperor's sword in his hand vibrated. Under everyone's astonished gaze, he took the initiative to attack. "Is this going against the will of the immortal realm?" Everyone in the Ten-Corner world muttered softly. Bai Yu's eyes were filled with worry. "Survive, Senior." They all knew that although Lin Yu's performance had exceeded their expectations, it was still extremely difficult for him to defeat an Ancestor Realm expert. This was something they knew. Lin Yu knew it too. Hence, he used his full strength in his first move. Otherwise, he would not stand a chance. Even so, Lin Yu could only barely withstand the attack. The shocking sword light lit up the entire universe. Ancestor Lu struck. The sky seemed to have been sliced open. It left behind a crack that was difficult to heal. Ancestor Lu held a sword in one hand and a supreme artifact in the other. He struck out with a powerful killing move. The Nether Holy Master was sent flying a few hundred feet before he could stabilize himself. "No wonder my disciple died in your hands." He finally understood when he looked at Ancestor Lu. However, even he felt an enormous amount of pressure. "Your cultivation is not as simple as a peak over God," the Nether Holy Master said with certainty. This was because Ancestor Lu's sword contained the laws of Tao. It was definitely not inferior to an overgod. Instead, it had already transcended. It was definitely much more profound than an ordinary Ancestor Realm expert. Ancestor Lu remained silent. Before the old Holy Master of the Dark Nether Saint Land could stabilize himself, he attacked again. The sword light in Ancestor Lu's hand was not dazzling. However, it gave off a feeling of returning to simplicity. Every sword strike contained an extremely powerful force. Moreover, they were all condensed together. The strike seemed to be able to slice open the entire universe. With the support of the supreme artifact, Ancestor Lu's strength was no weaker than an Ancestor Realm expert. Moreover, his comprehension of the Ancestor Realm had far surpassed the Nether Holy Master's. This made the Nether Holy Master's expression change. Under the attack of the immortal sword, he felt as if his immortal body was being torn apart. This also made the Nether Holy Master not dare to face Ancestor Lu head-on. A dark gold staff appeared in his hand. It was intertwined with Tao and truth. Even so, cracks still appeared under Ancestor Lu's almost decayed sword. This was the artifact that the Nether Holy Master had forged with his life. As he broke through to the Ancestor Realm, the dark gold staff naturally broke through that step. Due to its special material, it could definitely be passed down as an immortal inheritance artifact. At this moment, a crack had appeared on the dark gold staff because of Ancestor Lu's attack. It could not be restored. This surprised the Nether Holy Master. However, things had already come to this. He was being suppressed again and again. He could not care less. It was no longer the time to feel sorry for the artifact. At this moment, the Nether Holy Master was truly enraged. The battle between Ancestor Realm experts was extremely terrifying. Black Chi rampaged as sword light filled the air. It completely drowned the place. At this moment, the beings from the other forces on the chain bridge all looked over at the same time. They were all shocked by the performance of Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu. The ones fighting with the Nether Holy Master and the ancient Pod Holy Master are actually those two humans. They could still clearly remember the strength and dominance that Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu displayed on the altar. However, there was confusion on their faces. Why don't I see the others from the Nether Holy Master and the ancient Pod Holy Master? At this moment, they realized something. Could it be that, The ancient Pot Holy Master and the Nether Holy Master have been destroyed? The two old Holy Masters are blocking the people from the 10-direction world because of this. This was undoubtedly a great earthquake in the 10 great Holy Lands. The beings from a Holy Land were all wiped out. Moreover, those who entered the burial ground were all the top cultivators in the Holy Land. This could very well cause a Holy Land to fall completely. It would not be able to recover even after millions of years. The strength of those two humans is only at the Overgod realm. How can they fight with Ancestor Realm experts? At this moment, someone noticed that the cultivation base displayed by Ancestor Lu and Lin Yu was only at the Overgod realm. In particular, Lin Yu's aura seemed to have broken through to the Overgod realm not long ago. However, he was already at the peak. Facing the overwhelming pressure of the Ancestor realm aura, he was able to persist and not be defeated. This caused everyone to be astonished. They were dumbfounded and no longer knew what to say. The scene in front of them had gone beyond their understanding. The Ancestor realm was invincible. They were living beings who had truly transcended. They were no longer at the level of cultivators in this world. They were absolutely invincible in the 10 great Holy Lands. And now, someone was actually going against the flow and killing immortals right in front of them. Chapter 1159. As the battle grew more intense, Lin Yu's brows were furrowed, but it wasn't because he was facing an invincible enemy. His heart was filled with worry. There was still an Ancestor Realm expert who hadn't shown up yet. If he showed up now, 10 Square World wouldn't have a chance to resist. The situation would be one-sided. The turbid immortal Sacred Ground's old Holy Master, who didn't stay in the Heaven Burial Ground a million years ago, was definitely here, but he hadn't shown up yet. This was a huge rock in the hearts of Lin Yu and the people of 10 Square World. The turbid immortal Sacred Ground's people had been lying low since the altar. They didn't seem to have participated in everything. That was why Lin Yu felt uneasy. At this moment, laughter came from the back of the abyss. A snow-white, ape-like creature was laughing. Every step it took left a trail of afterimages behind it. The abyss trembled. Behind him, there were a dozen or so other similar creatures. One of them exuded a terrifying aura. The turbid immortal Sacred Grounds people had also arrived. They looked at the people of 10 Square World with bloodthirsty and cruel smiles. The old Holy Master of the turbid immortal Sacred Ground appeared. As he appeared, the sky above the abyss was shrouded in fallen immortal light. He didn't stay in the Heaven Burial Ground for a million years, but his cultivation base didn't stagnate. He was even stronger than the old Holy Masters of the Nether Sacred Ground and Ancient Pot Sacred Ground. This was a losing battle. The 10 Square World's Holy Master didn't expect the 3 Sacred Grounds to give birth to 3 Ancestor Realm experts in a million years. This was beyond their expectations. Lin Yu was bleeding from the corner of his mouth because of the attack from the Nether Sacred Ground. His aura was also weakened. The gap between their cultivation base was too big. Lin Yu had already done his best to fight him to this extent. Now that the old Holy Master of the turbid immortal Sacred Ground was here, 10 Square World was in danger. At this moment, Lin Yu seemed to have made a huge decision. Senior, you take them away first. I will bring up the rear. Lin Yu's face was expressionless. The mysterious factor was related to Bai Xiaoli's escape plan. He could not give it up so easily. Ancestor Lu looked at Lin Yu and gave him a deep look. He already understood Lin Yu's intention and nodded. Be careful. At this moment, Ancestor Lu repelled the old Holy Master of the Nether Holy Land with a sword strike and broke away from his entanglement. The old leader of the turbid immortal Sacred Land seemed to have heard a joke. How can a puny overgod be bold enough to stop us? You can give it a try. Lin Yu replied indifferently in the face of ridicule and contempt. At this moment, he took a step forward, and the aura of his body gradually became incomparably overflowing. Tens of thousands of rays of white light shot out from his body. An endless storm of swords began to engulf the entire region. Even the old sacred masters of the ancestor realm were slightly startled at this moment. They felt a huge pressure in this storm of swords. The unifying chi of heaven and earth was one of the strongest attacks of the 8 divisions of the Great Void. Ever since Lin Yu broke through to the Divine King realm, he had not used it for a long time. This was because there was no one in the 12 universes who could force him to use this attack. To kill 1,000 enemies, he would lose 800 of his own men. It was only because Lin Yu possessed the power of the Divine King's order that he could use it so many times. I understand now. This kid wants to die with me. The old sacred master of the ancient Pot Holy Land looked at Lin Yu's killer move and seemed to have understood something. However, his eyes were still filled with endless contempt. You will never know the difference between the Divine King realm and the Ancestor realm. Do you think that you can make up for it by putting your life on the line? Today you will know what is heaven and earth. At this moment, the old sacred master of the ancient Pot Holy Land took action and blocked the path of Ancestor Lu and the others. However, when he took action, he was stopped by Lin Yu. The white light instantly engulfed the old sacred master of the ancient Pot Holy Land. A terrifying killing intent attacked him. He was already invincible among the 10 great holy lands. However, at this moment, his body was cracking. It was as if he was going to be cut into the tiniest particles by the sword storm. He wants to drag me into the abyss. At this moment, the old sacred master of the ancient Pot Holy Land was in disbelief. In order to injure me, he is willing to give up his life. At this moment, the old sacred master of the ancient Pot Holy Land shouted in the endless sword storm. He felt that although Lin Yu's attack could not take his life, it could definitely severely injure him. At this moment, his origin was already damaged. This would affect his fight for the mysterious factor. This was almost fatal. However, Lin Yu's attack was not over yet. At this moment, the unifying chi of heaven and earth engulfed the 2 old sacred masters of the netherworld and the turbid immortal Holy Land. Lin Yu had already made up his mind to severely injure the 3 of them so that they would not be able to display their peak condition in the upcoming fight. He wants to destroy us indiscriminately. What a decisive lad. When the old sacred master of the turbid immortal Holy Land saw the situation of the old sacred master of the ancient Pot Holy Land, his expression changed subconsciously. At this moment, he was actually retreating. The power of the unifying chi of heaven and earth had been greatly reduced after severely injuring the old sacred master of the ancient Pot Holy Land. However, if he wanted to fight it head-on, he would still need to put in a lot of effort. The old sacred master of the turbid immortal Holy Land thought deeply. He did not want to waste too much energy before this and affect the overall situation. This was also one of the reasons why he was late. The old sacred master of the netherworld snorted coldly and took a step forward. At this moment, Lin Yu's physical body was on the verge of destruction. However, the corners of his mouth still curled up. He was waiting for the remaining 2 old sacred masters to take the bait. At this moment, although only the old sacred master of the netherworld stepped forward, it was already enough for Lin Yu. At this moment, the power of the deity king's order had already started to emanate from his body. After comprehending all of the 8 great void divisions, the power of the unifying chi of heaven and earth was incomparable to before. At this moment, after severely injuring the old sacred master of the ancient Pot, it still possessed an extremely strong destructive power. When the old sacred master of the netherworld stepped forward, the black aura in his hand surged to the sky. He wanted to absorb the endless storm of swords into his hand and crush it. Puff! Unexpectedly, the moment the storm of swords was absorbed, an aura even more terrifying than before permeated the air. The old sacred master of the netherworld was caught off guard. His entire arm exploded. The aura of extermination directly invaded his body, causing his arm to be unable to recover for a long time. Blood immediately flowed from the corner of the old sacred master of the Netherworld's mouth. At this moment, Ancestor Lu had already led the people of the Ten-Direction world to the chain bridge. Bai Yu's tears kept welling up in her eyes. It was undoubtedly a fantasy for an overgod to forcefully stop 3 progenitor realm experts. However, it really happened now. However, Lin Yu would also die because of this. Everyone knew that the divine ability Lin Yu used was definitely at the level of a forbidden technique. And the price was his own life. In the end, the storm of swords swept toward the old sacred master of the turbid immortal Holy Land. However, its effect was almost negligible. In addition, the old sacred master of the turbid immortal Holy Land was already on guard against Lin Yu's attack. It was difficult for the storm to have any substantial effect. However, Lin Yu could be considered to have achieved his goal by reaching this step. He turned into a feather of light, and his figure slowly disappeared. Until the world returned to silence. Lin Yu's aura disappeared between heaven and earth. No! Under Ancestor Lu's lead, Bai Yu and the others had already reached the other side of the abyss. They just happened to see the scene of Lin Yu disappearing. Bai Yu cried bitterly and knelt at the edge of the abyss. The people of the Ten-Direction world had heavy hearts. Only Ancestor Lu frowned slightly as if he had seen through something. However, he still had doubts in his heart. Chapter 1160. Aunt, how dare you injure us like this before you die? The old holy lord of the ancient Pot sacred ground's eyes were cold. His entire body was covered in wounds. Destructive power interweaved on them. Even his source was damaged, causing his cultivation to show signs of instability. The old holy lord of the netherworld remained silent. Holding up his broken body, he saw that his right arm was empty, and there was still blood flowing out. Both of them were severely injured, which might affect the fight for the mysterious factor later. Fellow Taoist of the turbid immortal sacred ground, don't you think you've gone overboard? The old holy lord of the ancient Pot sacred ground looked at the old holy lord of the turbid immortal with a questioning gaze. They had already contacted the turbid immortal sacred ground before coming here. However, the turbid immortal sacred ground had only arrived when the battle began. Moreover, the turbid immortal sacred ground seemed to have deliberately held back during the battle, which inevitably made the old holy lord of the ancient Pot sacred ground and the netherworld holy lord unhappy. I've already seen through the kid's peculiarity, but I didn't have time to warn you. I didn't expect a puny overgod cultivator to possess such power. The old holy lord of the turbid immortal explained. His tone was sincere and apologetic. The old holy lord of the ancient Pot sacred ground did not buy it. In the end, he only reminded them indifferently, you should know that we're on the same boat under the ancestors' orders. If the turbid immortal sacred ground has any ulterior motives, we'll only report it to the ancestor when we leave. The old holy lord of the ancient Pot sacred ground directly mentioned the 10 monster kings. It turned out that the turbid immortal, ancient Pot, and the netherworld holy lord were targeting the Ten-Direction world on the orders of the 3 monster kings. They had already sensed that something seemed to have happened to Bai Xiaoli's seal, which was why they ordered the sacred ground forces to target the Ten-Direction world together 1,000,000 years ago. They wanted to know something. Let's go deeper and obtain the mysterious factor first, the old holy lord of the netherworld holy lord said. Now that the other sacred ground forces knew about their alliance, they might become the target of public criticism once they entered the Ten-Direction world. After all, the alliance of the 3 sacred ground forces gave off too much pressure. The other sacred ground forces had formed a grudge against each other because of the mysterious factor when the 10 sacred ground forces were first born. However, in order to obtain the mysterious factor, they would abandon everything else and increase their chances of obtaining it as much as possible. Right now, the biggest threat was undoubtedly them. However, they already had a way to deal with this. If the other forces were to join forces for a short period of time, they would not be as united as an iron bucket. They could use some methods to defeat them one by one. As they spoke, the three of them and the people from the turbid immortal Holy Land headed towards the depth. At this moment, Gu-Hu and Old Saint Lord Netherworld were already severely injured. It was very likely that they would not be able to recover in a short period of time. The old sacred master of the turbid immortal sacred land was deliberately increasing his speed. He wanted to reach the deepest part before the two of them recovered their cultivation. That way, there was a high chance that the mysterious factor would belong to the turbid immortal sacred land. Because of this, it was best for the current turbid immortal holy land to preserve its strength. At this moment, Lin Yu reappeared in the world under the effect of the King of God's order's time-reversing power. However, he had already arrived at the bottom of the abyss. Within the endless black fog, not a single ray of light could be seen. Lin Yu could only rely on his divine will to find a simple path forward. When he was above the abyss, after using the power of the God King's badge, he sensed that there was something in the abyss that was resonating with the God King's badge. There was still some time before the opening of the final destination. Lin Yu took advantage of this to investigate. As Lin Yu moved forward, there were piles of bones under his feet. Some had already turned into powder, while some were still emitting a sparkling light. There was no doubt that these bones were extremely powerful when they were alive. In fact, Lin Yu even saw one or two corpses. Their bodies were still there, but they were already rotten and emitted an unimaginable stench. These were definitely the corpses of Ancestor Realm experts. However, there was something strange about the aura at the bottom of the abyss. Even the bodies of immortal and indestructible Ancestor stage experts were unable to withstand the corrosion and began to rot. Lin Yu could not help but become cautious. He did not know how far he had walked. This place was already very far from the location of the cable bridge above. However, the number of corpses here did not decrease. Instead, there were more and more of them. They piled up into mountains, and some still maintained their divine forms. Lin Yu realized that the corpses here were definitely not left behind from the battle between the 10 great Holy Lands forces. Instead, an unimaginable battle had once happened here. To be able to involve so many divine kings and ancestor realm cultivators, Lin Yu already found it hard to imagine which era this shocking battle had happened in. Lin Yu recalled the few people he had encountered in a certain era in the stone wall when he was in the 10-directional world. They said that before their era, there had once been a war that destroyed the sky and decimated the earth, involving a wide range of people. If he connected this place and thought of the 10 great demon kings, these figures were all sealed. This could not help but make one's hair stand on end. However, Lin Yu was just guessing and did not stop for long again, because the Divine King Token's reaction was still ahead. As the black fog slowly receded, a pure land seemed to appear in front. There were ancient peach trees growing, their roots intertwined and intertwined. Pink petals were floating down. Like a fairyland, there was a rich origin substance inside, accompanied by the fragrance of peach blossoms. Just by staying in this place, one would feel comfortable all over and forget to leave. And at this time, Lin Yu was not in the mood to enjoy the scenery, because, in the center of the peach forest in front, there was a huge and boundless corpse. This corpse was very different from the corpses outside, which were rotten or turned into white bones. The corpse was very well preserved, as if there was still residual warmth on it, as if it had just died not long ago. The corpse was very huge, as if an ancient divine mountain was lying here. Even if one of them had passed away, the remnant aura on it was still terrifying, with a terrifying pressure. Lin Yu came to the corpse's head, and saw that the corpse's appearance was not much different from that of a human. It was just that there were 7 divine patterns on the corpse's forehead, which seemed to contain boundless power. Through the divine patterns, one could see an indomitable figure. Just a punch of the physical body could shatter the universe. A primitive aura was revealed. At this time, Lin Yu's expression changed, because he sensed the aura of life in this ancient corpse. However, this aura of life seemed to be very young, as if it was just born. And he also seemed to have sensed Lin Yu's aura. At this time, he had already noticed Lin Yu. However, Lin Yu did not sense any malice from it. Lin Yu sensed it again, and then decided to step into the ancient corpse's body. He entered through its slightly open mouth. Even the slightly opened lips of this ancient stone were like a huge gate that connected to the heavens. It was as if it was a huge door that connected to another world. Lin Yu walked in, and all he could see were black spots. Lin Yu also knew that the real reason for Gu Shi's death was because of the destructive black spots in his body. As Lin Yu spent a lot of time, he seemed to have reached the abdomen of Gu Shi. The field of vision here was even wider than before, as if he had reached a boundless world. At this time, the owner of the aura of life in front of him appeared. He saw a topless child slowly approaching Lin Yu. Chapter 1161. His eyes were as clear as a flawless lake. At this moment, he was looking at Lin Yu in confusion. "Who are you?" The young child was babbling and his speech was a little unclear. However, Lin Yu could vaguely make out the meaning from his spirit sense. The words that the young child spoke were an ancient language of a certain era. It seemed to carry the origin of the world. Every word that he said would be accompanied by a strange phenomenon. This made Lin Yu a little surprised. However, he quickly recovered. "I'm from the outside world," Lin Yu replied calmly. He could not see through the young child's cultivation. Moreover, he was in the body of the ancient corpse. It was indescribably terrifying. Therefore, Lin Yu did not deliberately hide it. "Oh, where is the outside world?" It seemed that the young child was born here and had never left. "It's very magnificent. There are magnificent rivers and mountains and peerless human traces," Lin Yu continued. This made the young child's eyes bloom with splendor. Lin Yu only said a few words, but it already made him yearn for it. His black gemstone eyes were constantly shining with stars. Lin Yu looked at the young child and did not know whether to laugh or cry. The young child was chubby. At this moment, he had already lowered his guard against Lin Yu. At this moment, his fat trembled and approached Lin Yu. "Can you take me out?" The young child's eyes were filled with pleading and hope. "Of course, it's not a problem to take you out." Lin Yu nodded with a faint smile. Although his words just now were deliberately touching the young child, looking at the young child's appearance was really lovable. Moreover, he was born in the body of the ancient corpse. It could be said that he had a huge connection with this powerful ancient corpse. The realm of this ancient corpse was no longer something that Lin Yu could see through. Moreover, this chubby young child's realm seemed to be fluctuating. At his peak, he was almost at the ancestor realm. This was definitely a top combat power. In the young child, there was obviously a clear and flawless heart. He was simply born for cultivation and his future was limitless. If Lin Yu could bring him out, he would definitely be an extremely powerful fighter. However, there seems to be a voice here that keeps reminding me that it wants me to take something out. The toddler hesitated and mumbled, "I haven't been able to sleep well recently. Can you come with me and take a look?" Lin Yu looked at the young boy and immediately agreed. Of course, he had been on guard the entire time. After all, the environment here was strange, and the appearance of the child, although he looked harmless to humans and animals. However, Lin Yu was a vigilant person. He had used the aura of the God King's medallion to protect his body. He was prepared to use his trump cards at any moment. The chubby toddler leading the way suddenly turned his head when Lin Yu used the aura of the God King's seal to protect his body. The confusion in his eyes deepened. "The aura on your body now seems somewhat familiar. It's just that I can't recall it. Lin Yu looked at the child in surprise. He naturally knew that the familiar aura that the child was talking about originated from the God King's medallion in his body. The God King's medallion was extremely mysterious. This was the first time in the history of Lin Yu's medallion that someone had sensed it. Even though the chubby toddler did not know what it was and could only vaguely sense it, it still caused Lin Yu to have doubts in his heart. At the very least, he now knew that the origin of the God King's medallion might be even greater than he had imagined. Is that so? You can sense the thing in my body? Lin Yu asked. I can. However, the thing in your body seems to have a layer of mist on it. It's making my eyes a little blurry. The toddler rubbed his eyes with his chubby little palms. It won't hurt you, right? Lin Yu continued asking. Of course not. Other than my eyes feeling a little sore, I'm completely fine. The toddler replied seriously. Then let's continue forward. Let me see what it is that's calling out to you. Lin Yu said. At this moment, he was also filled with curiosity. The reason for that was because after he had triggered the aura of the God King's medallion, his heart seemed to have received some sort of mysterious call that was guiding him forward. The direction that they were heading in was exactly the same as the location that the toddler had mentioned. Lin Yu couldn't help but feel even more curious. He wondered what it was that could cause the God King's medallion to react so strangely. As the two of them continued to force their way forward, Lin Yu could roughly tell that they were heading toward the ancient corpse's head. The direction that they were heading toward seemed to have already reached the neck. Lin Yu was very familiar with the environment here. He had passed through here and reached the depths of the ancient corpse. His snow-white teeth were like snowy mountains that were laid out horizontally. They gave off a feeling of warmth and coldness. The aura of the outside world entered through his slightly open lip. The chubby toddler had been here not long ago. However, because he was afraid of the aura of the outside world, he did not dare to go out even though he was curious. Now that Lin Yu was by his side, he had undoubtedly become a lot bolder. At this moment, the toddler came to the position of the ancient corpse's lip. Is that the outside world? The toddler pointed at the peach blossom forest that came into view and asked thoughtfully. The tip of the iceberg, Lin Yu replied calmly. Indeed, although the peach blossom forest was a magnificent scene like a fairyland, it was not that there were no places that were more beautiful than the outside world. Really? The toddler covered his mouth in disbelief. I thought that the outside world was everything. I didn't expect that there would be. It's a pity that I haven't even gone out of the outside world. He looked at the calm Lin Yu and seemed to be affected by his state of mind. At this moment, he took a deep breath and walked toward the outside world. Bang! A crisp sound of impact was heard. The toddler grimaced in pain. Unknowingly, a huge bump had appeared on his forehead. He was in so much pain that he jumped up and down. His eyes were misty and the tears that he was holding back seemed to be about to fall at any time. The ancient corpse seemed to have set up a barrier specifically for the toddler. It could not be seen or touched. As long as the toddler wanted to step out of the ancient corpse, it would automatically appear and block him. Thus, when Lin Yu tried it, he was able to freely enter and exit. Why can't I go out? The toddler cried loudly and rolled around on the ground. Lin Yu analyzed the situation and comforted him. You should only be able to leave after you obtain the things in front of you. Really? The toddler stopped crying and his eyes were filled with tears. There shouldn't be a mistake. Even if it doesn't work, you should cultivate properly. With your strength, you should be able to break through the barrier here, Lin Yu said. The toddler felt that this made sense and nodded repeatedly. But what is cultivation? He immediately thought of something and asked in confusion. At this time, Lin Yu realized that the toddler didn't even know what cultivation was. But now, his cultivation was so high. Could it be that his innate cultivation was like this? If this were to be known by those in the outside world, who had cultivated their entire lives, they would likely spit out a mouthful of blood and have their Tao hearts shattered. The end of their lives was just the starting point of a little brat. However, Lin Yu did not dwell on this issue. He was full of confidence. This was a kind of invincible belief. He could definitely become powerful and look down on the heavens and earth, standing at the top of the 12 universes. Chapter 1162. At this moment, the call from the front was getting stronger. The chubby toddler's body was already glowing with a dim light. Mysterious divine runes were gradually intertwined on his body. They were filled with power and immeasurable power. Even Lin Yu had no choice but to retreat to a spot 100 feet away from the toddler. Lin Yu silently looked at the toddler who was out of control. At this moment, the toddler's body was floating towards Gu Shi's head. The mysterious pull was getting more and more intense. In the end, Lin Yu's body seemed to be controlled as well. It was difficult to break free from the shackles. Open! Lin Yu naturally wouldn't let himself be trampled on. At this moment, the ruler of God's badge in his body was emitting a mysterious aura. Thus, he was able to isolate this attractive force. He looked at the toddler who was moving forward. His eyes were filled with calmness as he followed behind silently. A few hours passed. The scene inside the ancient corpse was very different. There was a dim light everywhere. However, there was a rotten smell mixed with it. The rotten smell started to recede with the arrival of the toddler. In the end, there was only a dim light. For a cultivator like Lin Yu, this scene couldn't be more familiar. I guess this must be the place where Gu Shi's divine consciousness is. Lin Yu looked around and said slowly. However, the abundance of divine consciousness here was beyond imagination. Moreover, this place had been eroded by some kind of power. However, it was still so vast. It was hard to imagine how strong Gu Shi's divine consciousness was when he was alive. It was boundless, like an otherworldly universe. As the child entered, there was not a single trace of impurities in this place. The toddler seemed to have entered a unique state. He had forgotten about everything and couldn't be woken up in a short period of time. Moreover, his body was still moving forward. There was some kind of power in the depths that was constantly pulling the toddler. Lin Yu could barely resist the pulling force with the help of the ruler of God's badge. However, this was also something that Lin Yu didn't understand. It was reasonable for a child to be guided by an ancient corpse. But what was the reason for this? However, all of this could only be found out when they followed him to the depths. Lin Yu looked at the vast and unfathomable power of divine sense around him, and did not stop. Instead, he continued to move forward in the direction that the child had floated to. No one knew how much time had passed. Lin Yu's perception of the outside world was very limited because of the strong consciousness of this place. As he went deeper and deeper, his 5 senses seemed to gradually disappear. In the end, he couldn't even sense the exact time. He didn't know how far or how long he had traveled. In front of him, a huge crystal appeared in the mist formed by his divine sense. It was like ice that had been frozen for hundreds of millions of years. Just by looking at it from afar, one would feel a chill run down their spines. At this moment, the child's body finally came to a stop. A faint barrier appeared in front of the crystal. It was this barrier that slowed down the child's advance toward the crystal. As time passed, the child was unable to enter it. Lin Yu was behind him. At this moment, the Divine King's token, which was close to the stone wall of the passageway under the volcano, started to move on its own. At this moment, the Divine King's token was emitting rays of light that intertwined in the space. With the power of immortality, it seemed like it was going to reverse the past, present, and future. Lin Yu's body was impacted, but he stood on the spot without moving. After so many years, he had completely gotten used to the power of time of the Divine King's token. However, the power of the Divine King's token disappeared as quickly as it came. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared, leaving no trace behind. Does this barrier require the power of the Divine King's token to break it? Lin Yu asked slowly as he looked at the barrier that was rippling due to the appearance of the Divine King's token. However, there was a puzzled look in his eyes at this moment. If the barrier here could only be broken by the power of the Divine King's token, then it was inevitable that he would come here. Was it the subtle influence of the Divine King's token, or was there something in the unseen world that was guiding it? Lin Yu became vigilant. At this moment, he suddenly realized something. The long history of the ancient world was like a long river, and the people in it were like the fish in it. They did not know the scenery outside the river. He did not know if there were people fishing outside the river. Is someone arranging the trajectory of my life? Lin Yu's eyes gradually turned cold. However, he did not know if it was true. If that was the case, it would be too sad. Lin Yu would not allow such a thing to happen. After a long time, Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes. His eyes had become extremely deep. It doesn't matter if there is someone or not. Since we need to break this barrier, let's break it, Lin Yu said. The power of the Divine King's token appeared in his hand. It was hazy and powerful, and it caused the endless power of the divine sense to retreat temporarily. Pop! It was like a drop of hot magma falling onto an ice surface. The power of the Divine King's token exploded the moment it came into contact with the barrier. At this moment, the barrier was slowly shattering, until it completely dissipated at a certain point. It turned into essence, as if it had never appeared in this place. Qi, the young child, who had been floating in the air, suddenly stretched out his arms. Bright light burst out from his 7 orifices, completely illuminating the misty land of the ancient corpse's divine sense, making it incomparably clear. Then, the young child's body approached the crystal and finally began to slowly merge with it. This seemed to be some kind of inheritance. A divine pattern appeared on the young child's forehead. It was exactly the same as the pattern on the ancient corpse's forehead that Lin Yu saw before he entered. However, the divine pattern on the young child's forehead now seemed to be alive. It was even more mysterious than the ancient corpse's divine pattern. Is this the inheritance of the ancient corpse? Lin Yu muttered to himself as he looked at the young child, whose aura was gradually becoming more and more intense. What he didn't know was whether the young child was a rebirth of the ancient corpse or a descendant that was deliberately left behind after it died. I am an ancient god, and I once participated in the Battle of Wu Sheng. I have a regret in my heart that I couldn't win. The successor should unlock the seal and receive part of my inheritance. A majestic voice sounded in Lin Yu's mind. An imposing figure appeared in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness. His hair was disheveled and he was majestic. He looked down on the 33 heavenly palaces with an invincible demeanor. His body moved at this moment, causing the entire world to tremble. Cracks that were difficult to repair appeared one after another. This is the 3 moves of the ancient god. Each move has the power to destroy heaven and earth. The successor, watch carefully. The body in Lin Yu's sea of consciousness raised both hands. Divine patterns appeared on his arms, as if a real dragon was entrenched in it. It was extremely powerful. He started from the origin of the technique and evolved the 3 moves of the ancient god for Lin Yu. This was a kind of divine ability that could refine one's body. If it was mastered, one punch could kill all enemies. It emphasized on breaking all techniques with one's strength. Lin Yu looked at the body in his sea of consciousness. On his arm, the divine runes gradually began to form. They originated from the inside of the body. These divine patterns were just the convergence and evolution of the power of the 3 moves of the ancient god. After it was mastered, it would naturally disappear. Chapter 1163. Lin Yu's battle constitution had improved once again. As time passed bit by bit, Lin Yu's strength was also increasing rapidly. At this moment, his physical body was emitting a holy light, as bright as the moon shining brightly. When Lin Yu completely comprehended the three styles of the ancient god, his battle constitution had already broken through the overgod realm and reached the half-step progenitor realm. Moreover, it was a flawless progenitor realm battle constitution, which was much stronger than ordinary progenitors. Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes, and two rays of clear light shrouded the place. The power of his physical body swept through the entire ancient corpse. Boundless blood qi raged like a vast ocean. Lin Yu's black hair danced in the wind until all the aura was withdrawn. The place returned to silence. Lin Yu bowed slightly to the ancient god's corpse, expressing his gratitude for imparting the technique. At this moment, the blazing aura on the body of the young child floating in the void also withdrew. The divine rune on his forehead also gradually disappeared, and finally disappeared into his body. However, the young child at this moment gave off an extremely ordinary feeling. However, Lin Yu knew that, at this moment, the young child had completely inherited the legacy of this powerful ancient corpse, and the divine substance within had already returned to the young child's body. As long as he was given some guidance in the future, his future would definitely be limitless. I felt like I had a dream. So comfortable. The young child groaned and stretched his back. Can I go out now? He suddenly thought of this, and his mood immediately improved as he cheered. He skipped over to Lin Yu. Of course. Lin Yu nodded. At this moment, the young child had completely accepted the legacy of the ancient god. Under the perception of the God King's badge, there were no longer any restrictions in this place. After a few hours of settling down, Lin Yu and the young child walked out of the ancient corpse's body. As the young child walked out, the ancient corpse began to slowly shatter, and in the end, it turned into specks of light that dissipated into the world, as if it had never appeared or existed. The young child's heart unconsciously became heavy, and tears welled up in his eyes. However, the young child's temperament was cheerful, and he quickly adjusted himself. Can I follow you in the future? The young child pleaded. Sure. Lin Yu nodded. That place will be my big brother from now on, the young child said seriously. Lin Yu smiled and did not refuse. In terms of strength, Lin Yu had no doubt that he was no match for Toddler. The toddler had fully absorbed the legacy of the ancient god. With his current strength, if he were to unleash his full strength, he would be able to surpass even progenitor realm experts. At this moment, Lin Yu was leading the way in front. The two of them rode on the Emperor's swords and executed the Imperial sword technique. They turned into rainbow lights and quickly headed towards the top of the abyss. Looking at the rapidly changing scene, the young child cried out in surprise. Lin Yu's face was as calm as ever. He had no idea what was going on in the depths of the heaven burying. Before entering the abyss, he had used the unifying qi of universe to severely injure the two old sacred masters, Yu Ming and Gu Hu. However, even so, it would be difficult for Ancestor Lu alone to obtain the mysterious factor in the final battle, even if his Tao was unparalleled since ancient times. Now, Lin Yu's physical body had reached the half-step ancestor realm. Coupled with his flawless cultivation and divine consciousness, it was not too difficult for him to hold back an ancestor realm. Moreover, he had Toddler, his little brother who possessed the strength of an ancestor realm, by his side. However, Lin Yu was secretly worried at this moment. He had been in the abyss for decades, and he did not know how far the battle had progressed. If 10 Square World was besieged again, it was very likely that they would have already retreated from the heaven burying. As the two of them moved forward quickly. Big brother, is there any trouble ahead? The young child was intelligent, and he could not help but ask when he saw Lin Yu's expression. Lin Yu nodded. If anyone dares to cause trouble for Big Brother, I will destroy them all with one hand. Toddler waved his fist in a babbling manner. At this moment, he had truly treated Lin Yu as his big brother. Lin Yu was somewhat gratified by Toddler's words. He originally wanted to use Toddler's strength to hold back one or two people after encountering ancient pot, netherworld, and turbid immortal sacred ground. He did not expect Toddler to take the initiative to ask. "Thank you." Lin Yu smiled at Toddler. "What did you say?" Toddler looked at Lin Yu with surprise, anger, and hurt in his eyes. "Thank you." Lin Yu was a little confused by Toddler's change in attitude. "How can you be so polite to me? Helping Big Brother is the right thing to do. Do you not recognize me? This is too hurtful." Toddler sighed. "You look down on me." Lin Yu did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Then when we see those people later, suppress them for me." Lin Yu's expression became serious with a commanding tone. "Okay." Toddler's expression changed immediately. "Just kill them." As he spoke, Toddler's expression became excited. The ancient god bloodline was constantly awakening in his body. "You don't have a name yet. In the future, you will follow my surname, okay?" Lin Yu asked. "That's great." Toddler was very happy. "My name is Lin Yu. Seeing that you are naturally warlike, Lin Yu." Lin Yu looked at Toddler. Toddler pondered for a while and frowned a little. "It's good, but I feel that it's still lacking a little domineering. I'm destined to become an existence that the heavens and earth fear." Toddler's eyes were in high spirits. "Since the heavens and earth can't restrain you, I'll call you Zhan Yu, Lin Zhan Yu." Lin Yu smiled. Toddler looked cute, naive, and chubby. Coupled with the name Lin Zhan Yu, there was an indescribable sense of joy. When Toddler heard this name, he was very excited. Zhan Yu, this name is good. In the future, I'll be called Lin Zhan Yu. The battle that will make me famous is here. Lin Zhan Yu had the aura of swallowing mountains and rivers. At this moment, his eyes were very bright as he looked straight ahead. The two of them were extremely fast. A few days passed. The origin material here was so dense that it couldn't be dissolved. Moreover, it was very pure. Even if one didn't deliberately absorb it, one's body would feel comfortable as if one was soaking in a hot spring in the celestial world. If one stayed here, even a pig would be able to attain the great Tao. However, Lin Yu sensed that there seemed to be a terrifying threat contained within. This threat couldn't be described, but it came from the origin. Not only Lin Yu, but all living beings who entered this place would also sense it. This was also the reason why Gu Hu and Old Saint Lord Yuming didn't choose to stay here. Instead, they took a step back and found a secret place in the periphery of the burial of heavens to cultivate for 1,000,000 years. Lin Yu guessed that the threat here had a lot to do with the mysterious factor that could help the 10 great monster kings escape. At this moment, Lin Yu noticed that something was wrong with Lin Zhan Yu and couldn't help but ask. Lin Zhan Yu suppressed his fear. His chubby little face was scrunched up. One couldn't help but laugh. In the deepest part ahead, there seems to be a coffin shrouded in endless black gas. However, the corpse inside is incomparably holy and exudes a white supreme substance. At this moment the toddler explained. Because of his special bloodline, he could see the scene in the deepest part. Now, he told Lin Yu what he saw. These words piqued Lin Yu's curiosity. "I didn't expect that there would be a coffin in the deepest part. I don't know what the black gas is, but the white supreme substance that I mentioned must be the mysterious factor." Lin Yu looked at the unknown place in front of him. "Do you sense the aura of other living beings?" The toddler's perception was very strong, especially when he was here. He could see through the illusion and see very far away. Lin Yu told Lin Zhan Yu about the aura of Ancestor Lu and the others. Lin Zhan Yu closed his eyes and extended his divine consciousness. After a while, he pointed to the northwest. "In this direction, they are very close to the coffin. However, there are a few other auras around them." After Lin Yu heard Lin Zhan Yu's feedback, he more or less understood. The people of 10 Square World should have been besieged again and fallen into a passive state. Without the slightest delay, Lin Yu circulated his cultivation and quickly headed in the northwest direction. Chapter 1164. The origin material here grew denser and denser. It was enough to obscure the divine consciousness of living beings. Lin Yu circulated his cultivation with all his might. His eyes shone like torches as he stared straight ahead. The origin material seemed to have opened up a path on its own, illuminating the path ahead. A few figures appeared in the misty land. The slender figure at the front was covered in blood. He held an immortal sword in his hand as his chest heaved up and down. However, his eyes were still peerless, as if they could cut through the sun, moon, and stars. Behind him was the second palace master. Facing the attacks of 3 progenitor realm experts at the same time, he did not flinch at all. That strange overgod brat is no longer here. Do you think you can defy the heavens by yourself? The old sacred master of the ancient pot sacred ground sneered. Although he had yet to recover from his serious injuries, under the suppression of the turbid immortal old holy master, Ancestor Lu had already suffered extremely serious injuries. His origin was almost shattered. Although Ancestor Lu's aura was still blazing, he could barely hold on. Brother Lu, you should leave. The second palace master's eyes were teary. You've done enough. Even the sacred masters of the 10-direction world couldn't bear to see Ancestor Lu die. Their 10-direction world owed Ancestor Lu too much. Ancestor Lu, you should leave. The 10-direction world's holy master sighed. We only have ourselves to blame for our current predicament. If Ancestor Lu was at his peak, the 3 sacred grounds might not be his match even if they worked together. However, the current sacred master of the 10-direction world used a formation to destroy his origin. In the end, it was all because of him, the 10-direction world's sacred master, who was the source of everything. The sacred master of the 10-direction world bowed, as if he was apologizing. Then Ancestor Lu left. I'm not here for the 10-direction world. I'm here for you. Blood trickled from the corner of Ancestor Lu's mouth. His words were very direct. However, he didn't care about what the 10-direction world did 1,000,000 years ago. He only signaled to the sacred master of the 10-direction world that there was no need for him to do so. When we first met, I already said that I would protect you for a lifetime. Now, I won't watch you be in danger. Ancestor Lu only spoke a few words indifferently with a smile on his face. At this moment, the second palace lord looked at Patriarch Lu. It was as if he had returned to 1,000,000 years ago, when they first met in the Forbidden Grounds. Ancestor Lu's invincible grace was still imprinted in his mind. However, he was now past his prime. Ancestor Lu appeared very powerless facing 3 Ancestor Realm powerhouses. This caused everyone's eyes to turn gloomy. Ancestors, the situation might change if we delay any longer. Let's kill them quickly. The 10 Square World's prospective Holy Son whispered into the old Holy Master's ear. You're shameless. You've wasted the efforts of the Holy Master and the others. Bai Yu stepped forward and angrily rebuked the 10 Square World's prospective Holy Prince who was trying to flatter her. I'm not a member of the Heavenly Fox clan. No matter how you treat me, I'm still an outsider. The 10 Square World's candidate's face was filled with disdain. Due to Lin Yu's appearance, Luo Yunyang felt that Bai Yu's heart had wavered. Along the way, his state of mind had undergone a great change, almost to the point of being twisted. Therefore, he submitted to the 3 Holy Lands and exposed 10 Square World's location to them. Everyone from 10 Square World glared at the 10 Square World's prospective Holy Prince. A bird chooses a tree to perch on. It's useless to say more. You've already lost. The 10 Square World's prospective Holy Prince said coldly. He quickly turned his head and said flatteringly, Ancestor, remember to leave Bai Yu to me. No problem. After we eliminate the remnants of 10 Square World, by you's little girl is yours to ravage. The old holy master of the ancient pot holy land nodded with a smile. Thank you, ancestor. The 10 Square World's prospective holy prince bowed. Traitor of 10 Square World, you disgrace. Do you think you can get me like this? What a joke. Bai Yu looked at him coldly. She had already made up her mind. If Ancestor Lu lost, she would commit suicide. She would never let that disgusting person get away with it. It's not up to you. The 10 Square World's prospective holy prince said. If I can't get your heart, I'll get your body. Even if it's despicable, I won't hesitate. You'll never know my feelings for you. I didn't expect 10 Square World to raise such a person. The 10 Square World's holy lord sighed. The old holy master of ancient pot and the others didn't give 10 Square World any more chances. The three of them joined forces and used their strongest moves. Signs of instability appeared in this space. All of the power poured towards Patriarch Lu. We can't sleep together in life. We'll die together. The 10 Square World's second palace master came to Ancestor Lu's side. Facing the power pouring down from the sky, he didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Ancestor Lu looked at the second palace master's determined expression and sighed. His weathered face was filled with gentleness. He stopped resisting and joined hands with the second palace master. Even an ancestor would perish in the face of this attack. The remnants of the 10 Square World, after today, you won't appear in this world anymore. Your branch will decline completely, said the old saint of the turbid immortal Holy Land. His chi was at its peak, and his face was filled with cruelty. There wasn't the slightest bit of pity. Just when the people of 10 Square World had given up resisting. Suddenly, a mighty wave of power came from outside the sky. As long as I live, 10 Square World will not be destroyed. The sky was torn apart. Lin Yu came with Lin Zhanyu on the imperial sword. How dare you bully my big brother's people? Lin Zhanyu's chubby little face was filled with anger. The aura on his body became more and more intense. Boundless blood chi erupted from his tiny body, wreaking havoc in this place like a vast ocean. Everyone present couldn't help but raise their eyebrows. They were all shocked. Who could have such vigorous blood chi? It seemed that the blood chi was intertwined with primitive patterns. This was the sign of a battle constitution reaching the pinnacle. He was definitely an ancestor, and his battle constitution was very powerful. The old holy master of ancient pot was the first to bear the brunt. Lin Zhanyu took a step forward in the void and punched out directly. Boundless blood chi came crashing down. The old holy master of ancient pot, who was already injured, felt the power in his body stagnate. He couldn't use it at all. Brother Nether, save me. The old holy master of ancient pot holy ground was shocked. Fear appeared on his face for the first time. He was retreating, but Lin Zhanyu had already locked on to him. He couldn't move at all. Puff! It happened so suddenly that even the old holy master of turbid immortal holy ground couldn't react in time. The old holy master of ancient pot was beaten into a bloody mist by Lin Zhanyu. The vitality of an ancestor was strong. However, after being struck by this punch, his broken body was only able to reconstruct itself with great difficulty. The damage to his origin was extremely severe, and his cultivation level had already dropped. Can't take a beating. Lin Zhanyu retreated to Lin Yu's side. Boss, is this an expert from the outside world? How dare he boast like that? Lin Zhanyu's face was filled with doubt. The old holy master of ancient pot almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He thought to himself, that person from turbid immortal holy ground said it. What does it have to do with me? His face turned green and purple. In his opinion, Lin Zhanyu was just a child. He didn't expect that after millions of years of cultivation, he would be ridiculed like this. Chapter 1165. This made him an old monster who had lived for millions of years, have a very ugly expression. However, it was not good to show it. Who are you? At this time, the old saint lord of the turbid immortal sacred ground looked coldly at Lin Jianyu, who had suddenly appeared. When the embers dissipated, only then did Lin Yu's figure slowly emerge. This caused everyone present to be astonished. You're not dead? The old saint lord looked at Lin Yu with a face full of disbelief. He had seen with his own eyes that Lin Yu had used a forbidden divine ability in front of him. His body had exploded, and his divine sense had collapsed. Even a heavenly god would find it difficult to save him. At this time, Lin Yu was standing in front of them safely. Senior. When Bai Yu saw Lin Yu's figure, she was surprised and happy, and her eyes bloomed with splendor. I'm fine, Lin Yu just said lightly. It seems that he has obtained an unimaginable good fortune, Ancestor Lu said slowly with a smile on his face. Although Lin Yu's physical body was not as strong as the little fat boy who had suddenly appeared, the unique aura of the ancestor realm had already appeared on the surface of his body. And it was very condensed, almost about to break through to the ancestor realm. Your grandfather is Brother Lin Yu's little brother, why aren't you kneeling down? Lin Jianyu spoke like an old man, as if he was passing judgment on the world. What a rude little boy, aren't you afraid that the wind will bite your tongue? The old saint lord's face also became ugly. You don't worship gods, you've lost your life. Lin Jianyu stood out, and his qi and blood became stronger again. I'll beat you down. Lin Jianyu moved. At this time, facing a real ancestor realm expert, he did not have the slightest fear. On the contrary, his eyes were blazing with fighting spirit. He had the momentum to conquer the heavens. He stepped in the void, not showing the slightest cultivation base, and only relying on the strength of his physical body, he could stay in the air. Such a powerful physical body was shocking. The old Saint Lord was facing a huge pressure. At this moment, old Saint Lord Netherworld's injuries had yet to heal. Only he could fight Lin Jianyu head-on. This made his expression turn ugly. The turbid immortal old sacred master had been preserving his strength all this time. However, it seemed like he could no longer conceal it. Lin Jianyu immediately locked onto him. Although Lin Jianyu's cultivation base had yet to truly break through to the ancestor realm. But it was a blood qi that overflowed the heavens. This was beyond their understanding. Even after living for such a long time, he had never seen such a monster. And judging from his age, he was definitely not old. At such a young age, he already possessed such battle prowess. It was truly chilling. Moreover, the baby said very naturally that Lin Yu was his big brother. Why didn't this little child appear when the 10-direction world was fighting a bitter battle? At this moment, the three old holy lords subconsciously looked at Lin Yu, trying to guess his identity. Lin Yu's appearance was very sudden. They didn't know where 10 Square World had come from. However, the three old sacred masters found it increasingly difficult to see through him. In just a few short years, not only did he come back from the dead, but his strength had also improved again. At this moment, they didn't have the slightest doubt about the aura emitted from his body. It was definitely enough to threaten them. And Lin Yu's cultivation base was still at the over-god realm. How stunning was this kind of person? Perhaps in the 10 great holy lands, such a person hadn't appeared for a long time. And in the 10 great holy lands, the human race's strength was weak. The resources they could obtain were just a little bit. It was simply a fool's dream to give birth to such a talented person. However, such a person had appeared in front of them. Not only Lin Yu, but also Ancestor Lu. This shocked them even more. Lin Jianyu was already fighting with the old holy lord of the turbid immortal holy ground. Lin Yu slowly looked at the ancient pot holy lord. He had suffered from Lin Jianyu's punch. At this moment, his vitality was greatly damaged. His cultivation base had already dropped to the half-step ancestor realm. He needed a long time to recover. Obviously, Lin Yu wouldn't give him such a chance. His aura directly locked onto Ancient Pot and the old Holy Lord Yuming. Senior Ancestor Lu, rest for a while. It's enough for me to kill them, Lin Yu said casually. He faced Ancient Pot and the old Holy Lord Yuming and said indifferently, attack together. His tone was filled with disdain. It wasn't boasting. Lin Yu truly had the confidence to say such words to the two Ancestor Realm experts. Everyone in the 10-square world was worried for Lin Yu. Although Ancient Pot and the old Holy Lord Yuming were injured, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Lin Yu's current cultivation base was still only at the Overgod realm. Their cultivation base wasn't high enough to see through Lin Yu's current state. Only Ancestor Lu nodded slightly. Be careful. Without hesitation, Ancestor Lu sat cross-legged on the ground and began to heal his injured body. Arrogant. Do you think you can do whatever you want just because your physical body has touched the threshold of the Ancestor Realm? The old Holy Lord Yuming was furious. He felt that he was being looked down upon. Noisy, Lin Yu only said indifferently. He directly interrupted the old Holy Lord Yuming's words. Then, he directly charged forward. His current cultivation base was indeed behind the two Ancestor Realm experts. However, they were all injured by Lin Yu's Qian Kuan Qi. Especially the old Holy Lord Gu Hu. He was even worse after Lin Zhanyu's punch. At this moment, Lin Yu seemed to have entered a no-man's land. On the other side, the 10-square world's prospective saints saw that the situation was hopeless and wanted to sneak away. Ancient Pot and the old Holy Lord Yuming couldn't even take care of themselves. Lin Yu directly destroyed the 10-square world's prospective saint's cultivation base and threw him in front of the 10-square world's Holy Lord. The 10-square world's prospective saint revealed a look of fear. Everything happened too quickly. Under Lin Yu's attack, his Saint Realm cultivation base was directly destroyed like a helpless child. He didn't even have time to scream in pain. The 10-square world's Holy Lord directly killed him. His body and soul were destroyed, leaving no trace behind. Now, Lin Yu began to look at Ancient Pot and the old Holy Lord Yuming. The fist in his hand was blazing, as bright as the sun. For a moment, people couldn't open their eyes. At this moment, the old Holy Lord Gu Hu felt an inexplicable sense of fear in his heart. He began to realize that if he continued to fight, he might really die here. This inexplicable feeling appeared. However, it was quickly suppressed. I am an Ancestor Realm expert. How can I be afraid of ants? He made his move. Between his arms, a flying immortal force appeared. One could vaguely see the illusory figure of one of the 10 great monster kings behind him. It was as if it was going to tear the sky apart. As the old Holy Lord Gu Hu's blood essence began to slowly merge into the illusory figure. One of the 10 great monster kings seemed to be awakening, crossing the seal and descending into the world. Summon the Ancestor. The 18th generation descendant of the ancient Pot Monster King welcomes the arrival of the Ancestor. The old Holy Lord Gu Hu mumbled as if he was reciting an ancient sacrificial language. An immense pressure came crashing down. Lin Yu's sleeves fluttered in the wind. Lin Yu stood under the illusory figure, looking extremely small. However, there was still no trace of fear in his eyes. Lin Yu merged with the summoned Azura figure and rushed into the sky. Ants, why don't you bow to the king? A majestic voice sounded. The illusory figures of the 10 great monster kings seemed to have gained consciousness. At this moment, he looked at Lin Yu indifferently. However, he didn't get a reply. Lin Yu used the 3 moves of the ancient god and directly defeated him. The illusory figure became unstable. The old Holy Lord Gu Hu spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out of the ground, creating a huge crater. Chapter 1166. 3 Moves of the Ancient God? At this moment, the expressions of the 10 great demon kings' phantoms changed slightly. It was as if such a superpower should not appear in this world. The origin of the ancient god was very mysterious. Even the 10 monster kings did not know all of its secret. The old holy master of ancient pot and the others did not know anything about it. Terrifying runes intertwined on Lin Yu's body. They were dark gold in color and looked like a huge dragon. Lin Yu's vital energy was like an ocean. At some point, he seemed to have surpassed the Master God realm and reached the Ancestor realm. He was exuding a terrifying power. At this time, Lin Yu's black hair had turned dark gold. He was like a god at the beginning of the world. He was cold and powerful. The aura he exuded made people want to kneel down and worship him. The ancient gourd shadow of one of the 10 demon kings slowly dissipated. It could not withstand the ancient god aura that Lin Yu exuded. The old holy master of ancient pots' aura was weak, and he looked like he was about to die. The light in his eyes dimmed. Lin Yu was very satisfied with the power displayed by the 3 moves of the ancient god. It had even exceeded his expectations. At this time, Lin Yu stood in the sky. He was surrounded by lightning. This was a phenomenon that was displayed by his extreme physical strength. Bai Yu's eyes were full of splendor. Lin Yu gave him the feeling that he was invincible. His aura made everyone feel solemn. Lin Yu took a step forward. The void cracked inch by inch under his footsteps, and it took a long time for it to recover. The old holy master of ancient pot had lost his ability to fight. Lin Yu's target was the old holy master of Netherworld. At this time, Lin Yu relied on the power of his physical body to shrink the ground into an inch. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of the old holy master of Netherworld. Boom! Cracks appeared in the void. The old holy master of Netherworld could not react in time. When he saw Lin Yu's fist light, Lin Yu had already arrived in front of him. The fist light was vast. There wasn't the slightest bit of skill to speak of. His movements were open and wide, and there was a sense of great ingenuity. This was the punch. The old holy master of Netherworld coughed up blood as he resisted. Lin Yu did not stop at all. He caught up with the old holy master of Netherworld. Another punch. The old holy master of Netherworld roared. He was unwilling and furious. He refused to believe that a mere overgod, who was only an ant in his eyes, would actually be unable to fight back at all. Even a simple parry was no longer possible. If I was at my peak, you would not, the old holy master of Netherworld said. However, he had forgotten that the injuries on his body were also caused by Lin Yu. Lin Yu said sarcastically, "If I were given 1,000,000 years, you would be nothing but an ant." In the 10-square world, the 3 palace masters who knew Lin Yu knew that Lin Yu's words were not without reason. From Ancestor by Xiaoli, they knew that Lin Yu had only cultivated for a few 100,000 years. An overgod cultivator at such a young age. And he could fight an ancestor without being defeated. He could even suppress an injured ancestor. He had not appeared since the birth of the 10 sacred lands. With Lin Yu's talent, it was not impossible for him to surpass the ancestor in 1,000,000 years. At least, he could become the strongest existence in the ancestor. The old holy master of Netherworld was silent. This was contempt. However, he couldn't say a single word of rebuttal. He could also sense that time had not left much of Lin Yu's aura. This also meant that Lin Yu's cultivation age was indeed very young. "I will let you know what it means to be strong." The old holy master of Netherworld was really angry. Black mist began to surge on his body. It directly covered the entire area. His body was expanding infinitely, and soon, it had exceeded 10,000 feet. His ferocious eyes, like the sun and moon, descended into the depths of the burial of heaven. As he breathed, a large amount of origin matter was absorbed by him, and after he spat it out, it had turned into a pitch-black color. The old Holy Master of Netherworld was like a monster born at the beginning of the chaos. Heaven and earth could not accommodate his figure. It was as if he was going to burst the sky. Lin Yu's figure stood in front of him, very small and almost invisible. Then, a fist light illuminated the universe. Lin Yu directly fought with the old Holy Master of Netherworld, who had turned into a giant beast at this time. The terrifying aura directly enveloped the void. It made the place where the two of them fought illusory, no longer real. At this time, they seemed to have transcended by relying on their physical bodies. The majestic aura of the burial of heaven could not trap them. Lin Yu's small body was filled with monstrous blood qi, and at this time, under the support of the three moves of the ancient god, it became incomparably dense. The divine runes between his arms were intertwined with lightning, and his eyes were like torches, shining brightly. Then, the terrifying fluctuations swept through the sky and earth. The origin matter here was sucked dry. It formed a vacuum, and all the light was swallowed up. Under the fluctuations, the Saint Realm's eyes became slack. At this level, even if they used all their cultivation, they would not be able to see through it. All the creatures in 10 Square World and Ancient Pot Holy Ground who were watching the battle, their eyes were in pain, and 2 streams of blood flowed out. Some even had their divine consciousness about to collapse. Only the experts in the Divine King realm could barely see what was happening in the sky at this time. Rumble. Violent fluctuations hit. A rain of blood fell from the sky. Every drop of true blood contained a mighty aura. The ground in the depths of the burial of heaven, which had existed since ancient times, was now full of devastation. The power nurtured by the true blood shattered the ground, turning it into a huge crater. Lin Yu's body was bathed in the rain of blood at this time, and he appeared in front of everyone. The huge body of the old Netherworld saint also fell from the sky at this time, and there was not a trace of life in it. His life had been cut short. Hiss! Everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air. They had witnessed the immortal slaying. Lin Yu, who was in the Overgod realm, killed an ancestor realm expert directly. In the history of the 10 great holy grounds, there were only a few ancestor realm experts. At this time, one of them had died. This was no doubt a huge earthquake. Moreover, the Netherworld holy ground was destroyed not long after entering the burial of heaven. Now that the old Netherworld saint was killed, it could be said that the Netherworld holy ground was completely finished. It would be difficult for them to recover after such a long time. A holy ground's forces that entered were completely destroyed. This had never happened before in the years since the grand event began. Even 1,000,000 years ago, when the 3 holy grounds joined forces to besiege the 10-direction world, they did not completely destroy it. At this time, everyone realized how powerful Lin Yu, who was bathed in the true blood of the old Netherworld saint, was now. His appearance directly broke the current situation of the 10 great holy ground. Moreover, they all knew how important this grand event was. There were many ancestor realm experts, not just the Netherworld holy grounds, ancient pot and turbid immortals. The other forces also had ancestor realm expert. But now, one of them had been killed by Lin Yu. He was not the only ancestor realm expert who had died. At this time, Lin Yu's gaze fell on the old Netherworld saint. Lin Yu's face was cold. However, he already had a better way to kill the old Netherworld saint. A terrifying devouring power attack. Lin Yu had not used, devouring the starry sky, for a long time, and now he used it again. He wanted to absorb the old Netherworld saint's cultivation to help him break through to the ancestor realm. If he had not obtained the fortune of the ancient god, he might not have had such thoughts. However, he now had a flawless half-step ancestor realm physical body, so he might be able to give it a try. Absorbing the cultivation of an ancestor realm expert was the fastest way for Lin Yu to break through to the next realm. The old Netherworld saint's face changed drastically. Lin Yu's divine ability was just too terrifying. He could already feel the origin energy in his body flowing away, gradually being absorbed by Lin Yu. Moreover, this was no longer under the control of the old Netherworld Saint. He was an Ancestor Realm expert, but now he could only be manipulated by an overgod. No! The old Netherworld Saint screamed in horror. Everyone felt their scalps go numb when they saw this. As time passed, the old Netherworld Saint's body and soul were destroyed, and he no longer existed in this world. The divine ability of devouring the starry sky was gradually withdrawn. Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes. The power of the old Netherworld Saint was stored in his body. The power of an Ancestor Realm expert was very powerful, and he needed time to refine it. Chapter 1167. On Lin Zhanyu's side, the battle was almost set. The turbid immortal Sacred Ground's old Sacred Lord coughed out blood continuously. Suppressed by Lin Zhanyu's blood qi, all his spells and divine abilities were destroyed under a single punch. Especially after Lin Yu killed Yu Ming and Gu, whose old Sacred Lord. The turbid immortal Sacred Lord was even more flustered now, constantly on guard against Lin Yu's attack. However, Lin Zhanyu was already in the mood to kill. Seeing that he maintained the upper hand, Lin Yu only watched from the side, guarding against the turbid immortal Sacred Ground's old Sacred Lord's escape. As time went by, the last turbid immortal Sacred Lord exploded into a bloody mist under Lin Zhanyu's fist. Everything was settled. The people of 10 Square World quickly cleaned up the battlefield. The remnants of the turbid immortals were all killed, no one escaped. Lin Yu and the others looked into the depth. At this moment, the power of the mysterious factor had begun to spread. It was magnificent and vast. The depths of the burial of heaven seemed to be splitting heaven and earth. This place was filled with a dense fog that concealed one's spiritual sense. There are still 6 sacred grounds ahead, we can't be careless. After a few hours, Ancestor Lu's injuries were healed. After hundreds of years in the burial of heaven, Ancestor Lu's strength was gradually moving towards his peak. After the battle, he was already in the half-step progenitor realm. His strength was very solid. He was almost only 1 step away from the progenitor realm. At this moment, Ancestor Lu's aura was increasingly restrained. However, Lin Yu and the others did not doubt that Ancestor Lu definitely had the strength to kill an progenitor realm expert. The current lineup of 10 Square World could be said to be on par with the entire 10 Great Sacred Ground. They almost had the battle strength of 3 progenitors at the same time. Unsurprisingly, the outcome of the battle had already been decided. As Lin Yu and the others entered the deepest part of the burial of heaven, the expressions of the other Sacred Land's forces changed upon hearing this. Someone sighed softly. The sacred grounds they were in did not have any progenitor realm expert. Now, even if they entered the deepest part of the burial of heavens, it would be difficult for them to obtain the mysterious factor. Therefore, they were very magnanimous. They cupped their hands towards Lin Yu and the others, acknowledging Lin Yu. Then, the tokens in their hands lit up. Their figures slowly disappeared from this place. The other 2 forces also did the same. As for the remaining 2 holy lands, the Sea of Misery and the Permith, after a moment of hesitation, even the Ancestor Stage experts ultimately chose to withdraw. The 10 Direction World's Saint Sovereigns cupped their fists to show their respect. In the end, they waited for another 20 years and finally obtained the mysterious factor that was emitting white light. The 10 Direction World's Holy Lord placed the mysterious factor into a special container. There was an unconcealable joy in his eyes. After obtaining the mysterious factor, their old ancestor, Bai Xiaoli, would be able to escape. This was the wish of many generations of the 10 Square Worlds people, who had sacrificed their lives for it. The light of departure shone. The people from the 10 Square Worlds slowly appeared on the altar. After that, the group didn't stop and continued on their way back. The journey was very lonely. However, everyone was in a very good mood. 10 Square World, Heavenly Island. Bai Xiaoli was already waiting for them in the main hall. He had received news that the 10 Square World had obtained the origin substance. This also meant that his physical body was about to be freed. At that time, even heaven and earth wouldn't be able to restrain him. Lin Yu and the others slowly entered the main hall under the watchful eyes of all the living beings in the 10 Square World. They were the heroes of the 10 Square World. They could be said to be the founders of the immortal world. Because of them, their old ancestor could definitely lead the 10 Square World into a new era. The 10 Square World would no longer be a barren and desolate place. Because of the escape of a supreme expert like Bai Xiaoli, the destroyed world would return to its former peak. "You're back!" Bai Xiaoli was overjoyed. He took the initiative to walk down the main hall to welcome them. "We didn't disappoint the old ancestor. We brought back the mysterious factor." The Holy Lord knelt on the ground and slowly raised the container that contained the mysterious factor above his head. "Good, very good." Although Bai Xiaoli had lived for a long time, she had been trapped in the seal of the 10 Square World for too long. Now that she finally had a chance to break free, how could she not be happy? "It's all thanks to God King Lin Yu and Ancestor Lu that we were able to obtain the mysterious factor." The Holy Lord of the 10 Square World didn't hide anything and reported to Bai Xiaoli. Bai Xiaoli nodded. "Ancestor Lu, I can fulfill my promise to you now." "Thank you, Senior." Ancestor Lu cupped his hands. "Let's pick a date to get married on Heavenly Island." Bai Xiaoli smiled. The second palace master's face flushed red. "Old ancestor, now is not the time to talk about this. It's getting late." The third palace master teased. The main hall was filled with laughter. Bai Xiaoli looked at Lin Yu. "There's no need to say anything between us." Lin Yu smiled. I also contributed a lot and killed an old man." Lin Zhanyu was a little dissatisfied. He jumped and came to Bai Xiaoli's side. Only then did Bai Xiaoli notice Lin Zhanyu. Looking at the faintly discernible divine mark on his forehead, Bai Xiaoli fell into deep thought. "Little kid, where are you from?" Bai Xiaoli's eyes were deep, and she was interested in Lin Zhanyu. "My name is Lin Zhanyu, and I'm from Heaven Burial." "Lin Zhanyu? My big brother named me," Lin Zhanyu said proudly. At this time, Bai Xiaoli had already guessed Lin Zhanyu's identity. He muttered in his heart, "Seems like the chaos of the world is about to start again. Even the ancient gods are beginning to manifest." However, he still smiled and said, "You're not bad. I should express my gratitude to you. Since Big Brother doesn't need it, I naturally don't need it either." Lin Zhanyu refused. Everyone couldn't help but laugh when they saw this chubby kid speaking in such a serious manner. However, some of them knew Lin Zhanyu's combat strength, and their faces were filled with respect. After all, in this world, the strong were respected. No matter how young Lin Zhanyu looked, they couldn't show the slightest disdain. Everyone in the 10 Square World celebrated. The banquet began, and the Heavenly Island was filled with music and dancing. On the second day, Ancestor Lu and the second palace master got married. Bai Xiaoli personally presided over the wedding. Today, the two clans are united by marriage, and a promise is made. Our fate will be sealed forever, and we will be called the same. Today, the peach blossoms are shining brightly, and it's a suitable home. I predict that the melons will blossom continuously, and everyone will prosper. Solemnly, we promise to write a letter to the Red Leaves Alliance, and record it in the Mandarin book. The Saint Lord's face was filled with reluctance as he recited a congratulatory message. The second palace master wore a rainbow dress, and a beaded curtain on her head. The corners of her eyes were moist. Lin Yu and the others presented their congratulatory gift. Bai Yu's eyes were filled with envy, but her heart was filled with sadness, because she knew that it was impossible for her to be with her beloved. The wedding lasted for 7 days, until the morning of the 8th day. Under Bai Xiaoli's lead, everyone from the 10-square world came to the ancient altar of the 10-square world. This was the place where Bai Xiaoli was sealed. Lin Yu was very familiar with this place. At this time, Bai Xiaoli had once again possessed Lin Yu's body. The power of the seal permeated the air, and it had a great influence on Bai Xiaoli. Chapter 1168. Bai Xiaoli was not the only one who had to retreat. Even the Heavenly Fox clansmen had retreated far away due to the power of the seal. Only Lin Yu, Lin Zhanyu, and Lu Zhu were left. Breaking the seal was of great importance. They needed someone to protect them. Lin Yu held the vessel that contained the mysterious factor. At this moment, he slowly walked towards the altar. Lin Yu chanted the ancient sacrificial language. The space around the altar became very unstable. At this time, Lin Yu slowly opened the seal. The mysterious factor inside began to flow into the altar like water. The origin of the mysterious factor was very mysterious. No one knew where it came from. However, this power was very mysterious and had a great effect on breaking the seal. As the mysterious factor flowed into the altar, the power of the seal on the altar began to boil. It was very violent. In the past years, after the 10-square world obtained the mysterious factor, they would choose one of their clansmen to sacrifice, because since the birth of the 10-square world, no one had been able to resist the power of the seal. Strength was one factor. The main factor was the bloodline of the living beings in the 10-square world. The sky above the altar was gradually covered by blood-red clouds. Lin Yu stood under it, motionless. He waved his hands and cast a mysterious spell. Following a special direction, it hit various parts of the altar. The seal was loosening. At this time, Bai Xiaoli in Lin Yu's body was also using her power to connect with the body in the seal. This was related to Bai Xiaoli's escape. Everyone's brows were tightly knitted. And because they had to break the seal completely, the danger this time was very great. Even Bai Xiaoli had told Lin Yu not to take the risk and to break the seal by himself. But this way, the chances were much smaller. In the 10-square world, only Lin Yu and Bai Xiaoli's aura were compatible and would not be rejected by the seal. Lin Yu did not agree to Bai Xiaoli's suggestion. As the fluctuation of the seal became stronger and stronger, it had already far exceeded the limits of what this piece of land could bear. The earth was turning into nothingness, and even the stars in outer space were exploding. Lin Yu's half-step ancestor physical body was gradually unable to endure and cracks began to appear. Seeing this, Ancestor Lu and Lin Zhanyu simultaneously channeled their power into Lin Yu's body. It temporarily stabilized Lin Yu's body that was heading towards nirvana. The cracking trend was alleviated. At this time, the seal had already been opened. Below the altar, a boundless shadow of a demonic beast appeared. As the seal slowly unraveled, an unparalleled pressure was formed, and Bai Xiaoli's true form was reflected in the skies. The size of its body was even larger than a continent. However, its fur was dim, as if it had already lost its vitality and divinity. He had been trapped in the seal for far too long. Even though the powers of the 10 demon kings were hard to fathom, Bai Xiaoli's physical body was still damaged to a certain extent under the corrosion of time. Now, Bai Xiaoli, who was in Lin Yu's body, suddenly opened his eyes. He turned into a ray of light and directly entered his body. His divine consciousness and physical body merged into one. Bai Xiaoli, who was below the altar, had runes densely covering her 9 fox tails, as if there were worlds being born and destroyed on them. One could see a bright world evolving on the fox tails. Nirvana, this was an existence that surpassed the ancestor realm. On their bodies there was the most original Tao law. There was no doubt that existences at the level of the 10 demon kings could easily destroy the living beings of a universe. This kind of Tao law was too terrifying. Even if it was not deliberately emitted, it still made the living beings of the 10-direction world, who were extremely far away, feel waves of palpitations. They subconsciously knelt on the ground, incomparably pious. "Welcome, ancestor, for breaking the seal." Everyone's voices gathered together, becoming incomparably grand. At this time, Baishyali's backup plan also appeared. It was the power of will that had been in the 10-direction world since ancient times. Now it was gathering from all over the 10-direction world. Baishyali, who was below the altar, opened his eyes incomparably cold. At this time, his crawling body was also struggling to break the shackles of the seal. Only Lin Yu and a few others knew that this was far from enough. The power of the seal was too strong. Although Baishyali's methods were heaven-defying, most of the power had been worn down over the years. At this time, although there was the destruction of the mysterious factor, it still seemed a little powerless. "Break!" Baishyali roared in the seal, his face gradually becoming distorted. He had waited for this day for too long, and he absolutely could not give up so easily. Now, his divine consciousness and physical body had merged into one. If he failed, he would fall into the seal again, and could only wait for endless years. This was not something he would allow. Lin Yu, who was outside the seal, also used all of his strength at this time. He did not hesitate to use the space-time power of the God King's token. Several kinds of extremely strong forces of heaven and earth gathered together. The power of will was also constantly attacking the seal, exerting force from both inside and outside. At this moment, the seal was on the verge of collapsing. It seemed like it could break at any time. However, this remaining power of the seal was as indestructible as a boulder. At this moment, Baishyali, who was within the seal, was also gradually showing signs of being unable to hold on. The God King's token within Lin Yu's body began to move. At this moment, Lin Yu did not hesitate at all as he threw himself into the seal. "What are you doing in here?" Baishyali's face was filled with anxiety. He had a premonition of his own condition. It was very likely that he would not be able to break out of the seal. At this moment, Lin Yu had actually taken the initiative to jump into the seal. If he failed, Lin Yu might be left here forever. Furthermore, his strength was only that of a master god. He would definitely not be able to withstand the power of the seal. It would not be long before his body and soul would be destroyed. "Don't worry," Lin Yu gestured. He was not a reckless person. Baishyali, who had been with him for so long, naturally knew this well. However, in front of a powerful seal, there was still no room for carelessness. The God King's token within Lin Yu's body emitted a power that could reverse time. It temporarily restored Baishyali's strength. As Lin Yu waved his hand, the God King's token erupted with a different kind of power. It was extremely mysterious and involved some kind of origin of the universe. Baishyali's expression changed slightly. "I misjudged previously. I did not expect it to be this kind of power." At this moment, Baishyali could see the mystery of the God King's token within Lin Yu's body. There was a look of reminiscence in his eyes. However, he did not continue to be shocked. The plan now was to break out of the seal on his body. Baishyali's body once again erupted with a powerful power of origin. Rumble, under this terrifying impact, more than half of the lower 5 elements continent was shattered. At this moment, the seal was also completely shattered. The 9-tailed celestial fox, Baishyali, was completely free. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.